Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Plasse. Amanda Plasse was born on December 11, 1990. She grew up in Chapi, Massachusetts, with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Amanda's mother, Michelle Maías, described her daughter as a hippie and often joked that she was born in the wrong era. In 2011, Amanda worked as a waitress at a Friendly's in Chapi and was dating a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. On August 26, 2011, Seth called 911 to report that he had found Amanda unconscious in the kitchen of her third-floor apartment. During the call, Seth tearfully told the operator that when he arrived, Amanda was lying on the floor, unresponsive, with multiple stab wounds to her body. He did not know how to help and requested the police and an ambulance. When paramedics arrived, they confirmed that Amanda had died from multiple stab wounds, including to her chest, throat, and abdomen. Police cordoned off the home where the crime took place. When they arrived, they found Seth on the porch, crying and unable to calm down. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment. Whoever the perpetrator was, they had escaped but left behind some evidence. The first thing that caught the detectives' attention was the large amount of blood in the kitchen, indicating that the attack had been carried out with a knife. Police also found Nike shoe prints on the floor and handprints on the broken glass window. The motive for this brutal murder remains a mystery. Based on the condition and number of Amanda's injuries, detectives suspect that she may have known her attacker and that the motive was a personal vendetta. Therefore, the first suspect was Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green. Police took Seth Green in for questioning. It was no surprise that he was the first suspect, given his close relationship with the victim, his blood-stained clothing, and his role in calling 911. The fact that he and Amanda had been dating for less than 2 weeks before her death, and that her family barely knew him, raised suspicions. Seth was 7 years older than Amanda and likely had different views on some issues. But did that lead to an argument that resulted in the brutal crime? This led investigators to suspect that Seth could be the killer, even though he claimed Amanda was dead before he arrived at her apartment. They determined that about 2 hours had passed between Amanda's death and Seth calling 911. That was enough time to cover up evidence and remove the weapon. So the first question detectives had to answer was whether Seth Green had anything to do with Amanda's death. When Seth showed up at the police station, he looked like he had just been through something terrible. He was mourning the death of his girlfriend. Investigators wanted to know if his feelings were genuine or if he was just trying to deflect suspicion from himself. During questioning, Seth said he had been working all day. He had planned to take Amanda to the restaurant where she worked, but couldn't because of his busy schedule. Seth said he didn't know Amanda well because they weren't in a long-term relationship, but he loved her and had no reason to hurt her. Seth worked as a carpenter at a construction site. Investigators began asking him about his tools, implying that he may have used one of them to commit the crime. Seth often used a tool belt at work, which contained a variety of carpentry tools, including a knife. However, he claimed that he always put the tool belt back after work, and that day was no exception. Seth finished the job, changed his clothes and tools, and then went to see Amanda. He understood why he was the most suspected, but he still insisted that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend's death. The police eventually confirmed Seth's alibi. He even passed a lie detector test. When he arrived at the scene, he was wearing construction shoes, which clearly did not match the Nike shoe prints at the scene. In addition, his shoe size was much larger, and the fingerprints on the glasses did not belong to him. With these facts, the police eliminated him as a suspect. Because Amanda tried to resist, she inflicted injuries on the perpetrator. The perpetrator likely suffered scratches on his body in the first weeks after the crime, as a piece of skin belonging to the perpetrator was found under Amanda's fingernails, an important piece of evidence that the police had hoped for. However, when they tested the DNA sample, they found no match in the database. The motive for the crime remains unclear, as many of the items in Amanda's room were still intact. With no signs of forced entry, the police have two theories as to how the criminals entered the house. Amanda may have known them and let them in, or she may have forgotten to lock the door. Investigators interviewed Amanda's co-workers and friends and discovered that the case may have involved a love triangle. Before dating Seth, Amanda had been in a relationship with someone else, and the breakup was not smooth because Amanda initiated it. After a while, she started dating Seth, and Amanda's ex-boyfriend did not seem to be happy with this. Jealousy sometimes leads people to act rashly with serious consequences. Investigators checked the information but found this theory to be unlikely. Amanda's ex-boyfriend provided his DNA and fingerprints, neither of which matched the traces found on her body or at the scene. Furthermore, he had a convincing alibi. Police investigated other leads but failed to find a solution to Amanda's death, leaving the investigation at a standstill. Amanda's family was determined to find justice, so they distributed flyers and held community events in the hope that someone would come forward with vital information. Amanda's mother, Michelle, said her daughter was not perfect, but she did not understand why Amanda died and why no one had reported any useful information to the police. Amanda's family faced another emotional challenge. They discovered that several police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body on their phones and shared them with others, including civilians. According to an internal report, Sergeant Keith Lame, a senior officer who was in charge of monitoring the scene at 73 School Street, where Amanda was stabbed to death on August 26, 2011, was one of the photographers. He sent the photos from his cell phone to another sergeant, who then forwarded them to a patrol officer. One officer shared the photo with civilians, including a coach at a youth soccer game. Records show that Keith used his cell phone to take the photo. Keith then forwarded the photo to Sergeant Jeffrey Godair. Sergeant Jeffrey emailed the photo to Patrolman Chad Levesque. Patrolman Chad shared the photo of Amanda, lying on the kitchen floor, with other soccer coaches. As he did so, Chad said, "This is something I have to deal with at work." The photo was shown to at least 3 coaches at a youth soccer game in Agawam the day after the murder, according to Captain William Jebb, the internal affairs officer who wrote the report. At that time, Patrolman Terry Deck, who was assigned to record all traffic in the apartment for state police, took a photo of Amanda's body and emailed it separately to 6 Chicopee police officers. The investigation found that all 6 officers deleted the emails. None of them were punished for wrongdoing, and their names were not listed on criminal records. The others were punished for incompetence and failure to meet work standards. Terry and Keith, who took the photos, received letters of reprimand. Jeffrey and Chad were docked wages. Nearly 2 years after the murder, there was no sign that the investigation was any closer to finding the culprit. So investigators decided to review all the relevant evidence, hoping to find some missing information. After reviewing the evidence and items in Amanda's bedroom, they discovered a dry erase board with a suspicious message. The message read, "Dennis was here on November 8th. Interestingly, November 8th was only about 2 weeks before Amanda's body was discovered. Investigators began to wonder about the man named Dennis and his role in the case. They began to investigate the relationship between Dennis and Amanda by examining phone records and social media posts. While investigating Amanda's apartment, police discovered that her ex-boyfriend had given them a crucial clue. He said that Amanda's apartment had been broken into several times during her absence. In particular, Amanda told him that she suspected a young Puerto Rican man whose name began with the letter D. However, she did not want to report the incident to the police and wanted to resolve the situation herself by talking to the man. Amanda tried to talk to the man about the break-in, but he would not listen. Amanda then informed him that a neighbor had witnessed him at her apartment. She also begged him to return items that were missing from her home. However, the man became angry and left. The main goal of the investigators was to identify Dennis and determine whether he was involved in Amanda's death. They discovered that a man named Dennis Rosa Roman lived near where Amanda died. A search of Dennis's records revealed that he had been convicted of burglary and breaking and entering. However, no fingerprints were found that matched the ones found at Amanda's home. Police tracked Dennis to Westfield, Massachusetts, and asked him to come to the police station to talk, but he refused. During the brief encounter, Dennis appeared very nervous. Surprisingly, Dennis turned himself into the police station in November 2013 at the age of 22. Police questioned Dennis about his connection to Amanda. Although Dennis admitted to knowing Amanda from Chapi, he said he had not seen her in several years. This made sense since Amanda had been dead for some time. Investigators then asked him if he had ever been to Amanda's apartment. He replied that he had never been there and did not really know her well. He only admitted that he sometimes sold Amanda marijuana and had had a few brief interactions with her. During questioning, Dennis agreed to provide an oral DNA sample and provided his shoe size. The results showed that his shoe size matched the shoes found at the crime scene. Officers also noted that Dennis was wearing a pair of Nike Air Max shoes, the same type as the shoes found at the scene but with a different sole pattern. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions and promised to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Because there was insufficient evidence to arrest him, officers were forced to release him. This raised concerns that he might be attempting to flee, causing the investigation to stall. Further investigation revealed that Amanda had been in telephone contact with Dennis on July 28, 2011. She made 4 calls and received 5 calls from him. At the same time, Dennis changed his initial statement to police, admitting that he had spoken to Amanda at times. According to Dennis, Amanda told him that people frequently broke into her apartment when she was away, but she did not report it to the police because nothing of value was missing. However, investigators had heard this story many times before and now suspected Dennis was behind the break-ins. They believed he was hiding something, as his statement changed and lacked a clear explanation. When shown a photo of the dry erase board that read, "Dennis was here on November 8, 11, Dennis suddenly remembered writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never been in Amanda's apartment. Additionally, DNA testing revealed that his DNA matched DNA found under Amanda's fingernails and that his fingerprints were on a glass pane at the crime scene. This evidence confirmed Dennis's connection to the crime. After realizing that too much evidence was directly against him, Dennis changed his story again. He now claimed to have been present at the crime scene and tried to save Amanda from the attacker, implying that someone else was involved. When asked about the man's identity, Dennis refused, citing fear for his safety and that of his family. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the alleged perpetrator, a tall, 170 to 200-pound white male with light skin, blue eyes, wearing old pants and dirty boots, along with a t-shirt that read, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?" Detectives did not believe Dennis's testimony, as all the evidence pointed to only one person being present at the crime scene when Amanda was stabbed. They arrested Dennis and charged him with the murder of Amanda Plasse. The trial began in 2016, nearly 3 years later. Dennis's lawyers defended their client, arguing that although he was present at the crime scene, he was not responsible for Amanda's death. They accused the police of mishandling the investigation and framing Dennis after they failed to investigate thoroughly. Dennis claimed that on the day of Amanda's death, the drug dealer forced him to come to her apartment because Amanda owed the dealer $500 or $600. He claimed that the dealer started stabbing Amanda with a knife when things got bad. Dennis claimed that he wanted to intervene but was unable to stop the dealer. Dennis also claimed that Amanda had grabbed his hand, which is why his DNA was found under her fingernails. Prosecutors presented a different version of events. According to them, Dennis broke into Amanda's apartment while she was away and left a note with his name on her whiteboard. Amanda discovered this, suspected Dennis was the culprit, and called him to ask him to return her stolen belongings, which led to 9 phone calls between Amanda and Dennis. Prosecutors claimed that on the day of the murder, Dennis returned to Amanda's apartment thinking she was at work. However, Amanda had come home and a fight broke out, leading to Dennis killing her. A 12-person jury found Dennis guilty of causing the death of Amanda Plasse in July 2016, after hearing 8 days of testimony and deliberating for 5 hours. The court sentenced Dennis to life in prison without parole. The police department's internal investigation into the scandal surrounding the release of Amanda's photo was delayed for years. However, in 2018, Officer Jeffrey Gaudier was finally fired in connection with the case. Although he appealed the decision, he returned to work in 2020. Due to his misconduct and previous disciplinary actions, a commission demoted him to patrol officer. Amanda's law went into effect in Massachusetts on August 4, 2022. The law makes it a misdemeanor for first responders to illegally take photos of a crime scene, punishable by up to a year in jail or a $2,000 fine. Amanda's family also filed a lawsuit against the city of Chapi, which was eventually settled out of court for $100,000. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamon Springs, Florida. She grew up in a happy family with an older brother, a younger sister, and loving parents. Her father traveled frequently for work in several states, so he was not always home. As a child, Jessica was active and cheerful. She enjoyed spending time outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a special love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when she was 9 years old, her family decided to visit her grandparents for Easter. That morning, her father left the house to do some shopping, while her mother stayed behind to clean up and prepare for the trip. After school, Jessica came home and asked her mother if she could go out to play in the apartment complex. The area was relatively safe because it was far from the main road and had many trees around. Her mother agreed but asked Jessica to play only in the yard. A few hours later, around 6 p.m., Jessica's father returned home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was surprised because her daughter was supposed to be in the yard waiting for her father, but he insisted that she was not there. The parents went outside and searched the yard but did not find Jessica. Feeling worried, they decided to ask the neighbors in the hope that someone had seen their daughter. One neighbor said that he had seen Jessica in the front yard, sitting on the couch reading a book. But that did not help in finding Jessica. When darkness fell and their daughter was still missing, they decided to call the police. The police arrived a few minutes later and began searching and interviewing the neighbors. Despite their efforts, they could not find Jessica, so they expanded the search area to nearby streets. A few hours later, the police station received an unexpected call. The caller's voice was drowned out by loud noise, but the operator could still hear it. The caller revealed that the police would find the missing girl near a water pump station a few miles from her home. The police rushed to the pump station to check on the caller's instructions and witnessed a heartbreaking scene. Before them was the body of a girl lying near the station, hidden in a black trash bag. Just a few meters from the road, the pump station was under a bridge and could not be seen. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and turned her body over to the medical examiner. Meanwhile, investigators focused on finding the person who made the 911 call and reported the news, as they believed the call came from the killer. But there was a challenge. The call was made from a public phone at a gas station less than a mile from the crime scene, and by the time the police arrived, the perpetrator was gone. Detectives tried to find fingerprints on the phone, but it was quite a challenge. A public phone could have many fingerprints. Furthermore, investigators realized that the criminal could have wiped the phone after making the call or used gloves. Experts concluded that Jessica was killed elsewhere and her body was moved to the water pump station. Marks on the ground in front of the pump station suggested that the killer could have dragged Jessica's body from a car and dragged it across the ground. Jessica's clothes were intact except for one shoe. Police could not find it in her pocket or in the surrounding area. The only clue found at the crime scene was tire marks on the ground. Police could not be sure that they belonged to the killer's car, but they took pictures of them. Medical experts performed an autopsy and determined that Jessica died from strangulation based on marks on her face and neck. It appeared that the killer did it with his bare hands. A hamburger was also found in her stomach, consumed less than an hour before her death. Her mother said she had not given Jessica anything of the sort that day, leading police to believe the food had been provided to her by the killer. Experts also found no signs of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive unclear. Police initially suspected Jessica's parents because neither had a solid alibi for the time of her disappearance. Jessica's mother claimed that she was packing her belongings in the apartment, while her father went shopping. However, both had the opportunity to commit the crime, theoretically. Police were trying to figure out how the killer had taken Jessica out of the complex's courtyard without anyone noticing or without her calling for help. This led them to suspect that the killer may have known the victim and that she had left voluntarily. Another factor that supported this theory was the killer's tone during the 911 call. Although experts tried to erase the recording, they still noticed sadness and regret in the killer's voice, as if he truly regretted his actions. The killer's actions when calling 911 spoke volumes. It is possible that the killer did this for the thrill of toying with the police and manipulating the investigation, or that he truly regretted his actions and wanted to somehow alleviate that feeling. However, upon closer examination, investigators are inclined to the second option: that the killer truly regretted his actions. The police checked Jessica's father's car and found an important detail in the trunk. It was a roll of black garbage bags similar to the one in which the victim's body was found. However, after analysis, experts determined that this bag was not similar to the other bags in the father's car. Therefore, Jessica's father was eliminated as a suspect and investigators turned their attention to other people. Forensic experts studied the victim's clothes and body for clues. They found several important traces. There was a large amount of dog hair on the victim's body, which was very strange because Jessica's family did not own dogs. This suggested that the dog might belong to the killer. They also found human hair on the girl's body, which belonged to an unidentified white male. However, it took experts a few days to extract the man's DNA profile. Two types of strange fibers were also found on the victim's clothing. After analysis, experts concluded that one type of fiber could have come from the car seat cover and the other from the carpet. This further supported the theory that the victim had been killed elsewhere and taken to the water station by car. Experts attempted to identify the breed of the dog from the hairs on Jessica's clothing using an FBI database. This database contains microscopic photographs of hairs from many different dog breeds and has proven useful in criminal cases. The process of identifying the breed of the dog is done by comparing the hairs to samples from the database and eliminating each breed one by one. They eventually concluded that the hair on the victim's clothes came from a Chapi. This suggested that the killer may have owned such a dog and that the hair had gotten on Jessica's clothes while she was in the killer's car or at their home. Investigators developed a preliminary theory that the killer may have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to McDonald's for a hamburger, then taken her home and killed her. Meanwhile, experts were also trying to improve the phone call recording. However, this was a challenging task. To solve this problem, detectives sought help from NASA. NASA has advanced tools for improving recordings, originally designed to improve recordings from space. They agreed to help and provided the police with a higher quality recording. Experts needed a voice sample from the suspect to compare with the call recording and determine a match. Because detectives suspected that the killer might know Jessica, they decided to play the recording of the call to her mother. Jessica's mother listened to the recording and said that the voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't remember who it belonged to. However, after listening to the recording a second time, Jessica's mother recognized the voice as that of a neighbor who lived in the same complex. She added information to detectives that the man often walked a Chapi in the yard. Police quickly identified the man as James Crow, 35. During the initial investigation, investigators interviewed him along with other neighbors. He said that he saw Jessica in the yard while walking her dog. They talked for a while, and then he left. Detectives looked into his background and discovered that James had no criminal record. He lives with his wife, a nurse, and is currently unemployed, spending most of his time walking the streets with a Chapi named Pumpkin. The detectives realized that James's voice and the fact that he owned a dog of the same breed were not enough to arrest him. So they obtained a search warrant for his car. During the search, they discovered two troubling clues. Under the front passenger seat, they found an empty Happy Meal bag, which was suspicious since Jessica had eaten a hamburger. Experts also noticed that his car had brand new tires, as if they had barely been used. The police discovered that James had replaced the tires on the day of Jessica's murder, even though his previous tires were not very old and could have lasted for several more years. James claimed to have left the old tires at a car repair shop, which was unusual since they were not old at all. The police went to the service center to investigate. When they arrived, only one of James's tires was left. They compared its tread pattern to those found near the body. However, the results showed that they did not match. Detectives were not 100% certain that the tire tracks on the ground were left by the killer's car, as it was possible that the tire tracks were from a maintenance vehicle that regularly visited the area. Police searched James's apartment and found a box containing rolls of trash bags that matched the bags found on the victim's body. Although not direct evidence, detectives decided to investigate whether there was any way to determine if the bags collected at the scene and at James's home came from the same manufacturer. However, identifying these bags was difficult because they had no distinct markings, and there were hundreds of similar manufacturers. To address this challenge, detectives contacted Roberts, who was in charge of quality control at a bag manufacturing company. Roberts was able to identify the factory that produced the bags found in James's apartment through the code on the cardboard box containing the rolls. This product was manufactured at a facility in Virginia. Experts discovered that small amounts of iron or titanium were present in the bag's composition depending on their color. Since the materials are constantly changing during the manufacturing process, the ratio of plastic to iron or titanium actually changes daily. Detectives decided to take bags from James's apartment and the crime scene to measure the ratio of elements in the plastic using high-intensity X-rays. This gave them a very accurate ratio. Careful analysis showed that the ratio of iron to titanium in both plastic bags was the same, which suggested that they were manufactured on the same day and even in the same batch. The process of manufacturing garbage bags often leaves a small amount of microscopic debris on the machine, which is normal. However, when the plastic sheets are cut into bags, this debris forms small streaks that can be seen with the naked eye. Each roll of bags will have a unique pattern made up of these streaks. The pattern on each bag was created by particles of debris moving down the conveyor belt, which were then replaced by new particles. As a result, the same pattern would be retained over several hundred feet of fabric. This suggests that the two bags were not only produced in the same batch but also within a few hours of each other. When comparing the bags from the suspect's apartment in the crime scene, experts found that the lines on them matched remarkably well. Furthermore, after production, the bags were rolled into a bundle by a machine, but the machine often did this unevenly. Without close observation, these deviations were barely noticeable, making the rolls appear smooth. When examining the edges of the bags, there were small folds and wrinkles that formed a unique pattern similar to streaks. Experts compared and found that the pattern on the bags from James's apartment matched exactly the pattern on the bags at the crime scene. This meant that with a high probability, the bag from the crime scene had been taken from James' apartment. In addition, forensic analysts compared fibers found on Jessica's clothing with those from the carpet in James' apartment and the seat cover of his car. The results showed that both samples matched. Furthermore, an audio expert compared the recording of the 911 call with James' voice sample and concluded that they matched. Although the experts had collected a significant amount of evidence, the detectives still faced the major problem that all the evidence collected was circumstantial. However, the police were confident of James's involvement in Jessica's murder and decided to arrest him. Since James continued to deny his guilt, the case went to trial. The prosecution presented their report on how the crime occurred. James spent a lot of time outside with his dog, and all the local kids knew him well. They often played with Pumpkin, James' dog, and therefore, they trusted him. Jessica was no exception, and this trust may have led to her becoming a victim. The police provided an explanation of what happened on the day Jessica went missing. At that time, James was walking his dog and saw her sitting alone on a bench. He approached her, started chatting, and then invited her to McDonald's to buy her a hamburger. Jessica knew James quite well, so she agreed. According to the police, on that day, James noticed Jessica sitting alone on a bench while he was walking his dog and started chatting with her. He offered to take her to McDonald's, promising to buy her a hamburger, and Jessica agreed because she knew him well. After eating at the restaurant, he may have taken her back to the apartment complex and invited her to his home. He may have asked her to play with Pumpkin. The presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothes suggests she was there on the day of her death. According to the investigation, James may have intended to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Based on the autopsy results, the perpetrator not only strangled her with his bare hands but also pressed his palms against her face. This may be evidence that she tried to scream, causing the perpetrator to panic and attack. After Jessica's death, James placed her body in a garbage bag and put it in his car to transport it to a disposal site without arousing suspicion. James drove a few miles to a nearby water station, where he left Jessica's body. He then returned to his house, perhaps after stopping at a gas station to make a phone call. During the preliminary hearing, James' attorneys attempted to dismiss all available evidence, arguing that there was no solid evidence to prove their client's guilt. However, in capital cases, the standard of proof is much higher. In James's case, he had a very good chance of avoiding the death penalty. Based on these facts, a plea deal was proposed to James. Under the deal, James would admit to second-degree murder and receive a 40-year prison sentence without the possibility of parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. In the summer of 1998, 2 years after the murder, James agreed to the deal. Although he was not required to disclose details of the crime, James mentioned that part of his decision was to spare Jessica's family the long ordeal of a trial. The prosecution believed James had shown remorse, as demonstrated by his 911 call. However, the purpose of this call remains unclear. The only plausible explanation is that James genuinely wanted to reduce his guilt for such a serious crime. Jessica's parents were unhappy with the deal because they wanted their daughter's killer to receive the death penalty. They were also disappointed that James refused to confess to the crime. What was even more disappointing was that James did not serve his entire prison sentence due to poor health. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49, taking the secret of Jessica's murder with him. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Candy Rogers. Candace Rogers, also known as Candy, was born on July 18, 1949, in Spokane, Washington. She was an only child in her family, and soon after she was born, her parents divorced. Despite this, Candy maintained a close relationship with her father. Her father lived in the same city, so she got to see him frequently. Candy was a bright and cheerful child who loved spending time outdoors with friends, exploring nature, and playing with her dog. She had a strong desire to join the Campfire Girls, a well-known organization that provided girls with opportunities to learn new skills, go on hikes, and form lasting friendships. In 1959, at the age of 9, Candy finally got the chance to join the Campfire Girls, and she was overjoyed. As a member of Campfire Girls, one of her responsibilities was to sell mints door-to-door in her neighborhood. The organization provided her with boxes of sweets to sell. On Friday, March 6th, Candy planned to sell mints after school. After returning home, having dinner, and playing with her dog, she packed 8 boxes of mints and set out around 4 p.m. Candy had a plan to go door-to-door in her neighborhood, offering sweets to her neighbors. To avoid duplicating efforts, she and the other girls in the area had assigned specific streets to visit. However, when Candy failed to return home by 6 p.m. as expected, her mom started to worry. As night began to fall, her mom and grandfather set out to search for her, scouring the neighborhood streets but finding no sign of Candy. Soon, some family friends and neighbors joined the search, but despite their combined efforts, no one could find any trace of Candy. At this point, her mom decided to call the police for assistance. By the time the police arrived, the streets were dark, and something might have happened to Candy. The police began their investigation by questioning the neighbors and soon discovered that Candy had only sold 1 box of mints, suggesting that something might have occurred shortly after she left her house. A resident reported suggesting that something might have occurred shortly after she left her house. A resident reported seeing a girl matching Candy's description on a nearby street around 6:30 p.m. This was unusual, as Candy's mother had already begun searching for her by that time. Candy's grandfather had a strange experience as well, which occurred when he searched for her on the very same street. He narrowly avoided being hit by a speeding green 1953 Ford, which struck the curb. Unfortunately, he couldn't see the license plate number. The police issued a detailed description of the vehicle and initiated a search, but so far they have not been able to locate it. Later, around 9 p.m., several mint boxes were found scattered along the road near a bridge. These boxes belonged to Candy, increasing concerns for her safety. The police focused their search in this area, thoroughly searching both riverbanks and a small wooded area on either side. Despite an all-night search, Candy was not found. By morning, news of her disappearance had spread through local newspapers. And soon the case was being covered by statewide media. In 1959, child disappearances near their homes were unusual because it happened extremely rarely. The townspeople were extremely worried about this. To resolve this alarming situation, police have stepped up search work. They added mounted police, all-terrain vehicles and helicopters and military personnel to thoroughly search the area. In addition, over 1,000 volunteers joined in the massive search from both local areas and nearby cities. It became one of the most extensive search operations at the time. Despite these efforts, they still could not locate Candy. Another incident that added to the trauma of the town was when a search helicopter struck power lines and crashed. As a result, 3 of its crew members died. However, police remained dedicated and relentless, operating 24/7 on this case. With so many investigations open, officers still tried everything. Throughout the case, nearly 750 initial leads turned up. Officers closely inspected every detail. Regrettably, these investigative trails did not help discover any definitive proof about Candice. 2 weeks after Candice's disappearance, 2 military personnel from a local base went on a hunting trip in the woods west of Spokane. They stumbled upon children's shoes on the ground, which immediately reminded them of Candice's case. Since many military members had been involved in the search, they were familiar with the details of her disappearance. The military personnel reported their discovery to the police, who then showed the shoes to Candice's grandfather for identification. He confirmed that the shoes belonged to his granddaughter. The police quickly launched a search operation in the woods. Within minutes, an officer spotted a foot protruding from the bushes and discovered Candice's body. She was found lying in the underbrush, covered with pine branches. A medical examination revealed the cause of death was strangulation, also found marks on Candice's hands and feet, indicating that she had been bound. Although no ropes were found near the body. Furthermore, the medical experts concluded that Candice had been sexually abused. During the investigation, the police found a green car seat cover near the crime scene. Additionally, a small purple stain was discovered on Candice's clothing, which smelled like grape-flavored chewing gum. However, the police were unable to establish any connection between the stain and the crime. The police searched for any possible clues to find the killer. They examined incoming tips and investigated hundreds of individuals, including neighbors, suspicious characters, and previously convicted criminals. Their attention eventually turned to a 50-year-old man named Alfred Braves. Alfred became a suspect due to unusual circumstances. He took his own life on the same day Candice's body was discovered, in his car, near where the mint boxes were found. He also lived close to Candice's home. When police found Alfred's body, they discovered a rope and woman's hair pins in his car. After searching Alfred's house, police found numerous newspapers about sexual crimes against women and girls. They also learned that several women had accused him of harassment, and his wife suspected him of Candice's murder. However, investigators were unable to find any evidence directly linking Alfred to Candice's murder. Despite their reluctance, detectives had to eliminate him from the suspect list, as they did not have enough evidence to prove his guilt. As a result, they began investigating other suspects. Several months after the murder, the police had compiled an extensive list of suspects, but despite their diligent efforts, the investigation has made no new progress. Later, the investigators turned their attention to a new suspect, a serial killer named Hugh Morse. Hugh was arrested in 1961 for a string of crimes, and 2 factors made him a person of interest in Candice's case. Firstly, he was known for constantly chewing grape-flavored gum, which was similar to a substance found on Candice's clothing. Additionally, Hugh had killed 2 women in Spokane just a few months after Candice's death. Hugh's history of violence was also a concern. His first arrest was for assaulting a woman, but he received no serious consequences, merely being discharged from the army, where he was serving at the time. Hugh committed a string of robberies in Los Angeles, but only served 6 months in jail. After his release, he lured 2 8-year-old girls to a secluded area with the promise of ice cream and then sexually assaulted them. Despite being arrested again, he managed to avoid prison time. A medical commission evaluated him and deemed him a sexual psychopath, leading to his placement in a mental health facility. 2 years later, doctors believed he was cured and released him from the facility. Hugh then moved to Spokane, where he began spying on women through their windows. In November 1959, Hugh broke into the home of a 28-year-old woman, assaulted her, and ultimately killed her. 10 months later, he entered the residence of a 69-year-old woman and repeated the same violent actions. A month after that, he attacked another woman, stabbing her multiple times, but she survived the assault. Hugh continued to travel from city to city, committing numerous crimes, including attacking women and girls with a knife, sexually assaulting them, and killing 2 more victims. His crimes eventually caught the attention of the FBI, and he was added to the list of the country's 10 most wanted criminals. He was eventually captured and sentenced to multiple life terms in prison. While serving his sentence, Hugh attempted to take his own life, but was saved by the prison guards and continued to serve out his sentence. Detectives investigating Candy's case visited him in prison multiple times, but he consistently denied any involvement in the crime. A polygraph test was also administered, which suggested he was telling the truth. However, lie detector test results are not considered reliable because their accuracy is only relative. Despite the lack of evidence, but investigators initially considered Hugh a primary suspect. Due to his background and the fact that he lived in Spokane at the time of the murder. However, he continued to deny any involvement and police were unable to find any evidence to prove his involvement in the crime. The investigation then shifted focus to another suspect, 49 years old Howard Barnett. He was arrested in February 1960 on suspicion of molesting a minor girl. Before taking his own life in his cell at the Spokane police station, Barnett wrote a cryptic message in his own blood on the wall, stating, "I have a sin before the Lord." Detectives then began investigating Barnett's potential involvement in the crime, but they were once again unable to find any evidence of his guilt. Howard remained a primary suspect in the case due to his proximity to Candy's residence. Despite years of investigation, police continued to follow new leads and examine other potential suspects. A woman eventually came forward claiming to have seen a green car following Candy on the day she disappeared. Police refocused on locating the vehicle, but this lead ultimately yielded no results. It was notable that the woman waited many years to share this information. The case was reopened at various times, but each time investigators reached a dead end. Throughout the investigation, police not only had to pursue new leads but also had to verify the validity of confessions. 13 people gave false confessions to the crime. However, none of them were able to provide specific details that only the actual killer would have known. Instead, they often repeated details previously reported in the media. High-profile cases often exhibit unexpected and surprising behaviors, such as false confessions. In the case of Candy's murder, numerous detectives worked on the case over time, but none were able to solve it. This crime stood out as one of the most prominent and mysterious in the city and state. Before the murder, parents felt safe letting their children play outside, but the case led many to reconsider their views on safety. Years later, in the early 2000s, the case was reopened, and a new detective decided to use modern technologies to re-examine the evidence. Fortunately, the police had carefully collected and preserved the evidence in 1959, including a sample of male semen on Candy's clothing. Despite being stored for decades, experts were able to re-examine the sample, although it extremely challenging due to its age. After a lengthy investigation, experts finally extracted a DNA profile from the evidence and uploaded it to the FBI database. However, a search of the database yielded no matches. Further cross-examination of the profile with numerous suspect samples also proved unsuccessful. For many years, suspicion fell on Hugh Morse, but forensic evidence revealed no link between him and the crime. This lack of progress brought the investigation to a halt once again. Although the police had the killer's DNA, they struggled to identify the perpetrator. In 2021, a new detective reopened the case and decided to employ a new approach: genetic genealogy. This innovative method had already solved numerous cold cases and offered hope for finally resolving the standing mystery surrounding Candy's murder. The detective reached out to multiple labs that specialized in this type of analysis but was met with disappointment once again. To use this method, experts needed the original DNA sample, which was a challenge. Several labs attempted to work with the semen sample, but each concluded that it had degraded too much, making it impossible to extract the necessary information. The detective then consulted the final lab, which led to a long-awaited important discovery. With the help of state-of-the-art tools, the experts were able to successfully analyze the sample and obtain the perpetrator's DNA profile. This profile is then uploaded to a genealogy database to begin searching for the DNA owner's relatives. After a thorough investigation involving thousands of individuals, researchers pinpointed one family as the likely source of the DNA sample. They discovered that the DNA probably belonged to one of 3 brothers, all of whom had passed away. However, the team found that one brother had a daughter, and the police reached out to her for assistance. The daughter was shocked by the possibility that her father might be the killer, but she immediately agreed to help. She provided a DNA sample, proving that she was closely related to the person whose semen was found on Candy's clothing. With this new information, detectives obtained a court order to exhume her father's remains. A DNA profile extracted from the remains revealed a complete match with the DNA found on Candy's clothing, identifying the killer as John Hoff, 62 years after the crime. Hoff had never been a suspect despite hundreds of others being investigated over the years. Detectives investigating Hoff's biography uncovered his involvement in multiple crimes. At the time of Candy's murder, Hoff was 20 years old and lived close to her house, less than a mile away. He was also a soldier in the army, stationed at a nearby base, where Candy's body was found. 2 years after the murder, Hoff attacked another woman, binding and sexually assaulting her before attempting to kill her. However, the woman survived the attack. Following his arrest, Hoff received a 6-month prison sentence and was dishonorably discharged from the army. After his release, Hoff started a family, having 2 sons and 2 daughters, and he living an ordinary life. He changed jobs several times and at one point, suffered a severe chemical burn to his face while working at a food packaging plant, leaving a scar to his face. Hoff's life ended in June 1970, 11 years after Candy's murder, when he took his own life without leaving a note. Further investigation revealed that Candy might have known Hoff, as she was friends with his 10-year-old sister at the time. Years later, Hoff's sister told detectives that she had cried in Hoff's arms after Candy's murder, unaware that he was the one responsible for Candy's death. Candy's parents did not live to see the day when the killer's identity was revealed. Her mother passed away in 2006, and her father had taken his own life in 1963, 4 years after the tragedy. The reason behind his death remains a mystery. There is speculation that he was unable to cope with the loss of his daughter. Despite this, the case was eventually solved, marking one of the longest investigations in history, spanning over 62 years and involving multiple detectives across different generations. At the press conference, where the killer's name was announced, only one officer who had worked on the case in 1959 was present. He expressed gratitude for having lived long enough to learn the truth. Hoff's daughter initially struggled to accept that her father had committed such a horrific crime. However, she eventually came to terms with the fact, referring to her father as a monster who took an innocent life. She expressed regret that he was not held accountable during his lifetime. A chilling coincidence is that Hoff took his own life when his daughter was 9 years old. The same age as Candy was when she was killed. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Anel Baez Alvarez. Anel Baez Alvarez was born on March 17, 1998, in Guamachil, Sinaloa, Mexico. She grew up in a family with her father, Aide Alvarez, her mother, Hugo Beza, her brother Omar, and her sister, Aiden. As a child, Anel developed naturally and did not encounter any serious problems. Although she was initially a reserved child, over time, she became confident and charming, always trying to please those around her. Annel's father worked as a tailor, and the family lived a prosperous, close-knit, and happy life. However, everything changed when Annel's mother was diagnosed with cancer in the early 2010s. The whole family took care of her during her difficult treatment. After his wife passed away, the family was deeply hurt, but they did not give up and continued to support each other through the pain. This tragedy brought Annel and Aiden closer together, and they shared everything with each other. During the difficult times, Annel maintained a cheerful and friendly spirit. When she entered high school, she became an ideal daughter, managed the housework excellently, always took care of her younger sister, and got good grades in school. One of her hobbies was cooking for her family. Annel overcame her shyness and became one of the most popular girls at school. She formed a band and became the lead singer, developing a love for love songs, especially the ballad Amore Eterno. At that time, Annel also met her best friend, at least for a while. It was Erunde Elizabeth Gutierrez. They became an inseparable pair, admired by everyone around them and considered the most popular girls at school. Annel and Erunde expressed their friendship through social media. On October 14, 2012, Annel posted a photo with Erunde, expressing her joy at their friendship. She thanked God for giving her the opportunity to be close to Erunde and even considered Erunde a sister. However, as time passed, Annel and Erunde's relationship began to change. Despite being the same age, Annel and Erunde's personalities were completely different. Annel was a sweet girl who enjoyed listening to love psalms and spending time with her family. Meanwhile, Erunde lived in a dysfunctional family environment and became increasingly involved in the urban youth culture, commonly known as Guado, in Mexico. Erunde regularly attended musical events, such as the Calibre 50 concert at the closing ceremony of the Carnival in Guamachil in 2014. Erunde had clear political views, having shared on social media about attending a march in support of Joaquin Guzman Lora, also known as El Chapo. It is worth noting that Erunde often expressed her views on social media, unlike her friend Annel. The distance between Annel and Erunde grew over time. In 2014, Annel and Erunde both attended the Guamachil High School of the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, but they no longer interacted as closely as before. Instead, each created their own new group of friends. Annel became close to friends like Melissa, Karim, Manuel, and Maria Jose, who shared the same lifestyle as she did. She was often admired and loved by her group of friends, especially Maria Jose, who had known Annel since elementary school. Annel was always caring and helpful to the members of the group. She was also known for being polite and tidy. However, Erunde began to show a completely different personality on social media. She posted negative and disturbing content on her page, some of which was very alarming. Some of the posts looked like threats and did not make any sense at first. This raised concerns and suggested that Erunde might have serious mental health issues. Erunde's posts did not stop and became more and more suspicious. On March 3rd, Erunde posted another message saying, "Maybe not now, and not tomorrow, but soon. I assure you, I will not tell her anything then, but know that I have destroyed you mentally." Erunde's last post was dated March 16th, in which she wrote, "This really makes me desperate." However, no one knew who these threats were directed at. Rumors began to spread around the school that Erunde was angry with an old friend named Annel because they were no longer friends. Some even accused Erunde of being jealous of her old friend because everyone liked Annel. However, Annel did not care about what Erunde posted on social media. She celebrated her birthday with a big party, and everything in her life seemed perfect. But everything changed on March 19th when Annel did not pick up her youngest sister as usual. Hugo, Annel's father, received a call from the school informing him that his youngest daughter had not been picked up by Anil as usual. At first, he was not too worried and thought that Anil might have overslept or gone out with friends after school. But when he decided to call Anil to check if everything was okay, there was no response. Hugo thought that Anil might still be asleep after picking up her sister. He tried to contact Anil again but received no response. Despite repeated calls, she remained silent, causing Hugo's anxiety to increase. Hugo decided to go home to the Los Fuentes area. When he arrived, he found the front door wide open. Entering the living room, Hugo saw that some of the furniture had been moved, leading him to suspect that a robbery had taken place. He called Anil's name and searched the house desperately for her, but she did not respond. Hugo eventually went to Anil's room and tried to open the door but found it locked, which only added to his worries. Hugo knocked on the door several times but received no response from Anil. So, he broke the door open and entered. What he saw took his breath away. On the floor was Anil's lifeless body. He immediately called the police, who arrived quickly at the scene. When they entered the house, they found Hugo and his 10-year-old daughter sitting upstairs, deeply saddened. The police followed Hugo to a room where they discovered the body of his 16-year-old daughter, Anil. The police found that Anil's body had multiple wounds, and there was blood on the floor. It seemed that the attacker had tried to clean up the blood but failed. Through the autopsy, forensic experts discovered that Anil had been stabbed a total of 65 times. The police believed that the attacker had a close relationship with Anil. This theory was further supported by the fact that the doors and windows showed no signs of forced entry, leading them to believe that Anil knew the attacker and had let them into the house. They even speculated that Anil might have arranged a meeting with the attacker that day. However, when detectives checked Anil's cell phone, they found no information about her inviting anyone to her home. Therefore, they considered it might have been a chance encounter. Since there were no surveillance cameras in the area, detectives decided to interview neighbors. Some reported seeing a slim girl with black hair leaving the house. These statements narrowed down the suspects, and the police focused on a specific individual. They began questioning Anil's close relatives and discovered that they all had solid alibis. They claimed that Anil had no enemies and was very friendly, so they could not imagine anyone wanting to harm her. However, detectives noticed a social media post by Arunde, who expressed surprise at Anil's death. Some people expressed their condolences, but others criticized Arunde and accused her of being the murderer. They posted harsh comments, accusing Arunde of guilt. Arunde deleted her account, but the police were able to gather information in time. They summoned some of Anil's friends to ask about the connection between Anil and Arunde. All of them stated that the two had become estranged and that Arunde seemed jealous of Anil because Anil was more popular. After the interviews, detectives accessed Arunde's social media profiles and found threatening posts she had written months earlier. But the most notable was a post written just hours after Anil's death, in which Arunde wrote, "I was so stupid. Oh my God, what did I do?" Everything seemed to indicate that Arunde had become the sole suspect in the case. However, this information was kept secret because the police were concerned that Arunde might escape before they could arrest her. The agents were waiting for the right moment to act. The case attracted so much attention that hundreds of people gathered at a popular funeral home in Guamuchil to say goodbye to Anil. Anil's friends, relatives, teachers, and classmates cried and hugged each other, unable to believe that Anil had passed away like this. In the crowd, two people stood out, Arunde and her mother. Arunde entered the funeral home with her head bowed, her long black hair covering most of her face. Her outfit was unusual for the hot weather, as she wore a hooded hoodie with long sleeves, as if trying to hide something. Arunde and her mother went to pay their respects to Anil's family. They sat near Anil's coffin, where everyone present was whispering and looking at Arunde with tense expressions, noticing that she seemed very nervous. The police then approached Arunde and asked her to follow them to the police station. Arunde did not resist and went with the authorities. At the police station, the interrogation began. Initially, Arunde claimed innocence, but after a few questions, she opened up. Arunde showed scratches and bruises on her arms and torso, confessing that Anil had inflicted these injuries when she tried to defend herself in December 2013. The incident stemmed from a photo that Anil had posted online, in which they were caught hugging and partially undressed. Arunde did not like the photo because Anil had posted it without her consent. She asked Anil to delete the photo, but Anil ignored her. After a while, Anil finally agreed to delete the photo, but it was too late. Their friendship was irreparably damaged. The situation became worse when a classmate of Arunde's informed her that he had a sensitive photo of her, and she suspected that the photo was the same one that Anil had posted months ago. This made Arunde start thinking about revenge. Arunde had been expressing her anger on social media for a long time. On March 19, 2014, she wrote a cryptic statement on her personal page. Then, she went to Anil's house in the Los Fuentes neighborhood. When she arrived at Anil's house, Arunde brought 2 servings of ice cream and put on a fake smile. She said that she wanted to reconcile with Anil and be friends again. Anil happily agreed and led her into the house. She even invited Arunde upstairs to chat in her room on the 2nd floor, just like before. When Anil and Arunde entered the room, they started chatting and eating ice cream. After a short while, Arunde suggested watching a movie. She said that she was going to the bathroom and asked Anil not to stop the movie. However, instead of going to the bathroom, Arunde went downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed a sharp knife. Arunde returned to the room, hiding the knife under her clothes. She found Anil lying on the bed with her back to the door, giving her an opportunity to attack. Arunde pulled out the knife and started attacking Anil. Anil tried to defend herself but was unable to fight back. She lost too much blood and fell to the floor, becoming the victim of a brutal crime. Arunde became impatient. Knowing that she had to act quickly before Anil's family returned, she tried to clean up all the traces of blood in the house. Even though she used all the rags to clean, there was still too much blood. She could only clean up part of it. She finally went to the bathroom to wash her hands and then took Anil's clothes from the closet to wear. Arunde then closed the bathroom door and left Anil's body there. She left the house, leaving the front door ajar. This story of Arunde's made Anil's relatives very angry because they knew it was a lie. According to them, Arunde's description of Anil was completely untrue. In addition, Anil's friends insisted that they had never seen the photo mentioned in the story. The proceedings moved quickly. 4 police officers escorted Arunde to the juvenile court. After an hour-and-a-half-long hearing, Arunde was found guilty. Although she had carried out a deliberate plan and the murder was intentional, because she was only 16 years old, under Mexican juvenile law, Arunde was sentenced to 7 years in prison. She was transferred to a juvenile detention center. The victim's family thought justice had been served, but they were mistaken. The defense filed an appeal because the trial was held in the wrong venue. A higher court decided to reopen the trial. Despite the expedited process, the verdict was not overturned. This caused widespread public outrage. Hundreds of people shared pictures on social media with posters calling for justice for Anil. Several polls were conducted with over 5 million participants, and the majority felt that Arunde's sentence was unfair. They hoped she would receive a much longer prison sentence. However, after the trial was reconducted, the girl was still sentenced to only 7 years in prison. Hugo met with journalists and expressed his dissatisfaction. Although he was glad that the sentence was not commuted, he believed that Arunde's age should not have spared her from a longer prison term. Hugo hoped she would serve at least the full sentence. But that did not happen either. On July 6, 2016, Arunde's sentence was reduced to 5 years in prison. At the same time, the court also decided that if she behaved well, she could be released earlier. This event attracted dozens of journalists who took pictures of her, forcing state police officers to close the courthouse gates. The case became one of the most high-profile in the country. Hugo was not informed of this hearing, which made him extremely angry. The situation worsened when, on September 23, 2017, another hearing was held to evaluate Arunde's behavior in relation to reforms in the Federal Juvenile Justice Act. As a result, the girl was released after serving only 3.5 years. When Hugo left the court, he was extremely dissatisfied and felt he had witnessed a great injustice. Hugo expressed deep regret that the legislative reforms seemed to favor criminals over victims, and this seemed to be the sad end of the story. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Eurydice Dixon. Eurydice Dixon was born on November 10, 1995 in Melbourne, Australia. Her family consists of her parents and younger sister. When Eurydice was 7 years old, her mother died of substance abuse, leaving her father to care for her 2 young daughters. Eurydice's father worked hard to provide for the 2 sisters, and they lived in a small apartment. Eurydice is a quiet and polite person. Eurydice has a deep passion for the arts, especially drama. She pursued her passion at Deakin University, studying drama and actively participating in the theater troupe. Eurydice is a multi-talented person, not only a comedian, but also a writer who creates her own performances. In 2018, when Eurydice was only 22 years old, she stepped on stage at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Her stand-up routine, "At Home, I Feel Like a Tourist," was a huge hit, much to the delight of the audience. Eurydice was known to her friends as quiet and introverted, but also extremely intelligent for her age. Both her friends and the audience agreed that she had a natural talent for comedy. To hone her skills, Eurydice performed for free at local bars, using these opportunities to gain experience, gain fans. On Tuesday, June 12, 2018, Eurydice performed at a local bar just 3 miles from her home. That night, as usual, she humorously addressed gender equality and her concerns through her performance. After the performance, Eurydice met her boyfriend, Tony Magnuson, who was sitting in the audience. They spent time together at the bar, drank a can of soda together, and stopped at a nearby supermarket to buy groceries. At around 10:40 p.m., Tony got on the tram to go home. Eurydice walked home alone, blowing Tony a kiss and waving goodbye. Eurydice's walk home was about 3 miles long, taking her through streets, a park, and 3 soccer fields. It usually took her about an hour to get home. And Eurydice, having walked this route at night many times before, she felt safe because the streets were well lit. However, as Eurydice entered Princess Park, darkness enveloped her. To shorten the distance, she put on shoes and socks and walked barefoot on the grass. She crossed the park and the soccer field, just a short distance from her house. At 12:02 a.m., Eurydice texted her boyfriend Tony on Facebook, "I'm almost home. Where are you?" At approximately 2:50 a.m. on June 13th, a passerby found Eurydice unconscious on the soccer field at Princess Park. Although the passerby attempted CPR after calling an ambulance and the police, it was unfortunately too late. Eurydice had been strangled and had passed away. Fortunately, the area around Princess Park had several surveillance cameras that had recorded Eurydice walking alone through the park earlier. In the video, a young man can be seen about 100 feet away from her. He has blonde hair, a scraggly beard, and appears overweight, short, and stocky. To aid in the investigation, the police released the surveillance footage to local television stations and asked the public to help identify the suspect. That evening, James Todd, 19, contacted the police after his friends reported seeing his face on the news in connection with the death of Eurydice Dixon. James strongly denied any involvement in the incident and insisted that the person in the surveillance video was not him. The police asked James to come to the police station for questioning. At the police station, James denied any involvement, answered 660 questions, and insisted that he had nothing to do with the case. James also agreed to provide a DNA sample. A memorial was set up for the victim, Eurydice Dixon, where her body was found. People brought flowers to pay their respects, and a large crowd gathered to pay their respects. 5 days after her death, a vigil was held at the football stadium in memory of Eurydice. However, the night before the vigil, someone painted a giant 75-foot-long male genitalia on the lawn. Firefighters and city workers found it impossible to remove the paint and were forced to dig up and replace entire sections of the lawn, costing $20,000. The person responsible for the vandalism was identified as Andrew Null, a 29-year-old men's rights activist and Scientologist. Andrew admitted that his motive was to incite anger among feminists. During a subsequent interview, police told James that DNA evidence from the crime scene was being analyzed. James' demeanor changed. He looked down and stated that no further testing was necessary. James Todd confessed that he had been at Princess Park on the night of the tragedy, taking full responsibility for the murder and assault of Eurydice Dixon that led to her tragic death. In November 2018, James Todd gave a detailed account of his actions on June 12. He began with university classes in Broadmeadows, a suburb of Melbourne, which ended at 3 p.m. He then met 3 friends at the train station. They bought alcohol and supplies and took the train to Melbourne. The group spent time in Batman Park, sharing a bottle of alcohol until it was gone. Around 8 p.m., James purchased more cider and cannabis from people in the area. After one friend left, James and the other 2 friends returned to the train station, bought another bottle of alcohol and Coca-Cola, and took the train back to Broadmeadows. They got off at different stations, with James being the first to get off the train at Newmarket Station around 9 p.m. James Todd left Newmarket Station at 9:30 and walked down the street. At 10:43, he saw Eurydice outside a supermarket with her boyfriend Tony. After stopping at McDonald's, James returned to the same spot and saw Eurydice. She blew a kiss goodbye to her boyfriend, then started walking home. James felt attracted to Eurydice, even though he did not know her. James decided to follow her, staying about 150 feet away for an hour, walking about 3 miles across the city. Whenever Eurydice slowed down, James would stop to smoke. A surveillance camera recorded them passing the University of Melbourne. About 45 minutes after James began following her. As she neared her home, Eurydice texted her boyfriend Tony to let him know she was coming home. She was walking through Prince's Park at this time. At around midnight, Eurydice, after sending a text message to her boyfriend, was walking home across the 3rd soccer field when Eurydice was attacked from behind by James Todd. He grabbed her hair and skirt, pushed her to the ground, and then sat on her chest, grabbing her by the neck. In self-defense, Eurydice fought back by scratching James' face, neck, and shoulders. However, she was still unable to escape from James. After satisfying his desires, James strangled Eurydice until she died. According to his statement to the police, James said he thought Eurydice was drunk when he first saw her. He wanted to talk to Eurydice. However, Eurydice's autopsy showed no alcohol or illegal substances in her body. Medical examiners determined that Eurydice's cause of death was strangulation, accompanied by blunt force trauma to the head and other parts of the body. After committing the crime, James took Eurydice's phone and left the park. James found a temporary shelter and slept until 4 a.m. When he woke up, James checked the injuries on his body and face by taking a selfie with his phone. Then, James took a shower. He took off the t-shirt with the skull and special words, and left it there. Then, James returned to the area near Princess Park, where the police were investigating the case. James observed from a distance, not entering the park area. Then, James went home, buying coffee and cake on the way. At 7 a.m., James arrived home and started searching for information about Princess Park on the internet. Later, a friend of James said that James appeared on a TV show in a news report about the girl's murder. James decided to contact the police station after receiving a call from his friend. James' girlfriend, a 4-year relationship, recalls that during intimate moments, James tended to be rough with her. However, when she took a closer look at James' internet search history, she discovered that James was searching for violent and extreme content. James Todd, 19, is a working and studying student who aspires to build a career in the restaurant industry. He lives with his parents and often stays up late to watch adult videos. In particular, movies with tragic endings for female characters make him want to recreate them in real life. James grew up in very difficult living conditions. James' family consisted of 5 members, his parents and 3 sons, with James being the middle child. They lived in a chaotic and uncared-for environment, with many pets and a kitchen that collapsed due to rotting floors. Food was often cooked in the bathroom on a simple stove, right next to the toilet that was often clogged. The entire house was a mess with cluttered furniture, trash and debris everywhere, with leftover food and garbage everywhere. James was rarely at home and often had to sleep on a desk in a classroom or on a park bench. His mother said that the poor condition of the house was partly due to her suffering from depression. However, James insisted that their house was always in a state of neglect, regardless of the cause. Information about the father's role in the family situation was not mentioned. Prior to the incident, James had been visiting the house less and instead spent more time at his girlfriend's house. His girlfriend noticed a change in his behavior and attributed it to the stress of college and his worries about his future. The police discovered that James had been diagnosed with mild autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as a child. As a teenager, James had been in and out of psychiatric care several times because his teachers were concerned about his antisocial behavior. However, it should be noted that autism or Asperger's syndrome can manifest in many different ways, but is not associated with dark or harmful sexual tendencies. In James' case, 2 psychiatrists worked with him and analyzed his situation thoroughly. The doctors concluded that James showed signs of sadistic personality disorder, a factor that may have contributed to the tragic events. Doctors believe that the combination of autism and sadistic elements in James's personality may have played a role in his tragic end. James' friends saw him as sociable, cheerful, and seemingly no different from other people. They noted that he was able to apologize, distinguish right from wrong, and behave rationally. The judge who heard the case concluded that James Todd intentionally killed Eurydice Dixon, motivated by perverse desires and the intention to act out his perverted fantasies. As a result, on September 2, 2019, James Todd was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. James Todd's father, Jason Todd, took to social media to express his condolences to Eurydice Dixon's family. In it, Jason shared his pain and anxiety at not being able to see his son again after the incident. Jason also revealed that he had faced a lot of abuse and criticism on social media. However, Jason later deleted all of these posts. Meanwhile, James' legal team was trying to appeal James' life sentence. They argued that the sentence was too harsh for James, who was 19 at the time and had no previous criminal record. The lawyers also cited numerous testimonies from people around him who described James as a good and kind person. The lawyers also pointed out that James fully admitted his guilt and expressed remorse. They also pointed out that James was autistic and had lived in poor conditions before the crime. However, the appeal was ultimately rejected. Police investigating the case say James is now living in significantly better conditions than his previous home. James still feels remorse for his actions. James' time in prison was harder than other prisoners. Psychiatrists say James would pose a serious threat to women if released. Following the death of Eurydice Dixon, the bar where she last performed comedy decided to cancel its comedy nights on Tuesdays in her memory. To continue Eurydice's legacy, the Melbourne government has introduced grants to support emerging female comedians. Andrew, who desecrated the Eurydice Dixon Memorial, was convicted and sentenced to 5 months in prison. Following the tragic death of Eurydice Dixon, police have advised women to be more careful at night, avoid walking alone, and always carry their phones. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anna Delvey. Anna Sorokin was born on January 23, 1991 in Domodedovo, a city south of Moscow, Russia. Her father was a truck driver and her mother ran a small shop. In 2007, when she was 16, Anna and her family moved to Germany. Her father became a manager of a transport company, but the company went bankrupt in 2013. He then worked in a heating and cooling industry. During this time, Anna's mother took care of the family. Anna attended a Catholic school. Anna is reserved and modest. She also had difficulty learning German. In 2010, Anna began studying at an art and design college, but Anna dropped out in 2013. At the age of 22, she moved to Paris and started a new life. In Paris, Anna interned at a French fashion magazine and began using the name Anna Delvey. She claimed that Delvey was her mother's maiden name, but it was not. In Paris, Anna attended various fashion events and social gatherings. Her parents supported Anna financially as much as they could, and Anna always reassured them that investing in her future was a wise decision. In 2016, Anna moved to New York. Thanks to her relationship with Oliver Zahm, the editor-in-chief of the French magazine where she interned. Anna was a regular at high-class social events. Anna met the rich and famous at these gatherings. At these events, Anna introduced herself as Anna Delvey, a wealthy heiress from Germany. She claimed to have a fortune of 60 million euros in Swiss bank accounts. Many people are still speculating about Anna's father's true occupation. Some people thought he was a diplomat, others thought he owned an oil company, and some of Anna's acquaintances believed his work was related to the antiques trade. While in New York, Anna befriended the famous art collector Michael Soffelhang. Michael shared with her his dream of opening a private art museum. When Michael told her about his plans to attend an art exhibition in Venice, Italy, Anna expressed her desire to join him. Michael agreed to let Anna attend and paid for Anna's flight and hotel accommodation, on the condition that Anna would reimburse Michael later. However, while in Venice, Anna surprisingly paid for everything in cash, which Michael found strange. When they returned to New York, Anna was in no hurry to return the money to Michael. Eventually, Michael forgone the $3,000 outstanding. In New York, Anna befriended Rachel Williams, a former photo editor for a famous fashion magazine. Although Rachel found Anna demanding and rude, they maintained a close relationship. Anna began sharing her business idea with her friends. She wanted to buy a historic building on Park Avenue in Manhattan to create an art space called the Anna Delvey Foundation. The building would include galleries, shops, restaurants, bars, and a bakery on 6 floors. To convince others of her idea, Anna created fake financial documents using specialized software. These documents were intended to prove that she owned 60 million euros in Swiss bank accounts. Before that, Anna had taken out small loans to maintain her lavish lifestyle, and she often relied on the help of various financial advisors. In November 2016, Anna went to the City National Bank and applied for a loan of $22 million. Her reason for the loan was to finance the renovation of a historic building in collaboration with renowned designers and restorers. She mentioned that the funding was necessary because her assets were located outside the United States. Anna provided forged documents showing that she owned 60 million euros. However, the loan processing ran into problems when a bank employee noticed irregularities in the documents. The employee requested a report verifying Anna's foreign assets. The bank employee then received the document via email, which was from a person named Peter Henny. However, the bank employees were suspicious of the document because it was sent from a personal account. Anna explained that Peter was her family's financial advisor. The bank continued to scrutinize Anna's documents. But after a few months, they refused to lend to Anna because she could not prove the origin of the Swiss funds. After being rejected by the bank, Anna Delvey sought financial support from Fortress Investment Group. However, the company's CEO became suspicious of Anna's loan application due to inconsistencies in her documents. Specifically, Anna claimed to be of German origin, but her passport showed that she was born in Russia. This raised doubts about the authenticity of the information Anna provided. When the CEO began to examine Anna's assets more closely and wanted to meet her Swiss bankers in person, Anna quickly withdrew her loan application to avoid further scrutiny or investigation into her affairs. Anna's journey of fraud began with her seeking to borrow a large sum of money. Despite the difficulties and the need for guarantees from major financial institutions, she still managed to borrow $220,000 from various banks using forged documents. This success allowed her to enjoy a lavish lifestyle for many months. In 2017, Anna hosted a lavish birthday party at a luxury restaurant. However, after the party ended, the restaurant staff had to contact the guests to find Anna's contact information, as she had left without paying the bill. Anna finally resolved the issue by paying the debt in cash in February 2017. Anna also made an impression when she checked into the 11 Howard Hotel. Anna gave Neff Davis a $100 tip in exchange for information about the most upscale restaurant in Soho. Neff Davis noticed that other hotel guests often had a negative view of Anna because she often wandered around the hotel in her bathrobe. Despite this, the hotel staff were eager to serve Anna, as she was known for leaving generous tips. Anna and Neff Davis gradually developed a close relationship. Neff Davis became Anna's personal assistant. Anna paid Neff Davis's salary by inviting Neff Davis to fancy restaurants, taking Anna to high-end beauty salons and organizing luxury massages. Once, Neff Davis was invited by Anna to an exclusive party attended by famous actor McAllister. While staying at high-end hotels, Anna enjoyed many luxurious experiences. She often went to high-end beauty salons to get eyelash extensions done by top experts, costing around $400 per session. In addition, Anna also shopped for products from luxury brands and often dined at expensive restaurants. All expenses were deducted from her account at the 11 Howard Hotel. After 3 weeks of staying at the hotel management discovered that the credit card information Anna provided when checking into the room was invalid. The hotel owner demanded that Anna immediately pay the $30,000 bill. At this time, Anna was almost out of money due to her frequent spending on expensive food and services. This caused Anna's number of friends to decrease significantly, and Anna only spent time with 3 friends, Neff Davis, Casey, and Rachel. When asked about her financial situation, Anna remained silent. Once, Anna invited Neff Davis to dinner at a restaurant. After the meal, when Anna tried to pay with her bank card, her transaction was declined. She then gave the waiter 12 different credit card numbers, but none of them were accepted. Therefore, Neff Davis had to use his savings to pay the $283 bill. However, a few days later, Anna repaid Neff Davis the money, even paying back 3 times the amount owed in cash. In April 2017, Anna used forged documents to secure a $70,000 loan. She quickly used $30,000 of the money to pay off her outstanding bill at the 11 Howard Hotel. Anna Delvey planned to attend an annual investor meeting in May 2017, hoping to meet billionaire Warren Buffett. That same month, Anna invited a group of friends, including journalist Rachel Williams, fitness trainer Casey Duke, and a camera crew, on a trip to Morocco. The purpose of the trip was to film a documentary about the founding of her charity, the Anna Delvey Foundation. To stay, Anna booked a luxury villa in a 5-star hotel complex, priced at $7,000 a night. The villa had 3 bedrooms, a private pool, and an assistant. However, the trip ran into some problems. Early in the vacation, Casey Duke suffered from food poisoning and had to return to the United States for medical care. Later, the hotel staff informed Anna that they were unable to process for credit card payment. When she was unable to pay, Anna convinced Rachel Williams to pay the large bill of $62,000, an amount equal to Rachel's annual income. Rachel paid for Anna's trip to Morocco, Anna's extensive shopping spree, and her private tour of the Majorelle Gardens on Rachel's credit card. Anna promised to reimburse Rachel for these expenses. However, upon their return, Anna only paid Rachel $5,000, and then had to borrow money from others to pay for her New York apartment. In July 2017, complaints about Anna began to surface, particularly from designer Mark Cremers. Mark Cremers demanded payment for her work totaling $17,000. During this time, Anna frequently moved between hotels, accumulating significant debt, and repeatedly defaulting on her bills. Eventually, Anna found her financial situation dire. She and Casey met at a restaurant to discuss her life and Anna's financial situation. At first, Anna avoided answering, but the conversation soon brought her to tears. Anna claimed that she could solve her financial problems if Anna could buy back the historic building. However, Rachel also realized that she would have a hard time recovering the money Anna owed Rachel. Rachel decided to write a letter to the local prosecutor's office denouncing Anna. Within an hour, law enforcement officers contacted Rachel and informed her that they were conducting a criminal investigation against Anna Delvey. Anna Delvey was arrested on October 3, 2017, at a rehabilitation center in Los Angeles and was charged with grand theft and check fraud. By the spring of 2019, at the age of 28, Anna was facing a months-long court case that resulted in Anna having to pay debts totaling at least $275,000 to various organizations and individuals. In 2016 to 2017, prosecutors alleged that Anna Delvey committed the fraud over a 10-month period. From November 20, 2016, to August 2017. According to prosecutors, Anna's modus operandi included financing the lavish lifestyles of her middle-class friends to avoid raising suspicions about her wealth. In turn, Anna relied on wealthier acquaintances who were less vigilant about their spending to cover Anna's expenses. In her defense, Anna's lawyer asserted that she was confident in her future financial capabilities and that she could repay the debts Anna had incurred. During the trial, she frequently wore high-end outfits and expressed dissatisfaction with the way the press covered the trial. Although she did not consider herself a scammer, she was eventually convicted and sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison, along with a $24,000 fine. She was also ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution to her victims. In an interview, Anna admitted that she did not regret her past actions. She even stated that if given the chance, she would make the same decisions again. In 2019, Rachel Williams published a book titled My Friend Anna. The book chronicled Rachel's experiences with the scammer and the profound impact her trip to Morocco had on her life. Despite being detained, Anna's social media accounts remained active. Through her posts, Anna instructed her followers on how to contact her and how to send her money using cryptocurrency. During her time in prison, Anna paid special attention to her health and appearance. Anna committed to sleeping at least 12 hours a day and practicing yoga for 9 hours a week. Anna is proud of her positive changes. Without a phone, Anna spent her time reading. However, she was unhappy with the prison menu, especially the lack of fresh greens and broccoli. To improve the situation, Anna made her own nut milk, grew her own vegetables, and experimented with new organic products in the prison cafeteria. After serving her 4-year sentence, Anna Delvey was released on February 11, 2021. After her release, she returned to her lavish lifestyle by moving into a luxury hotel. This was made possible by the money she received from Netflix, who bought the rights to adapt her story. Part of this income was used to pay off some of Anna's outstanding debts. However, Anna's freedom did not last long. Just 6 weeks after her release, on March 25, 2021, Anna Delvey was arrested by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Anna was detained for 18 months due to her expired security visa. The decision to detain her was made because the immigration judge judged that if released, Anna would likely return to her fraudulent behavior. In February 2022, Netflix premiered the film Inventing Anna, written by Shonda Rhimes, starring Julia Garner as Anna Delvey. It is reported that Netflix paid Sorokina $320,000 for the rights to her story. Anna is currently under house arrest in an apartment in New York. During this time, she is not allowed to use the internet and strictly adheres to this rule. However, Anna still keeps in touch with her family by phone and is allowed to attend some meetings on Thursdays. Anna also continues her artistic activities by participating in magazine photo shoots and giving interviews. Recently, Anna had the opportunity to celebrate her 32nd birthday at her New York home in January 2023. Currently, Anna is nurturing ambitious plans for the future. One of her plans is to launch her own reality TV show. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Dorothy Stratton. Dorothy Ruth Stratton was born on February 28, 1960, in a neighborhood in Vancouver. Her parents were of Dutch descent and moved to Canada a year after she was born. The Stratton family later expanded with the birth of a son named John, and 7 years later, Dorothy had a younger sister named Louise. Her family lived a simple life. Dorothy was a good student. During her childhood, she did not dream of becoming famous or aspire to have a brilliant career. She only wanted to have the basic things that her poor family could not provide. In 1977, Dorothy started working at a fast food restaurant called Dairy Queen while she was still in high school. At that time, she was 17 years old, with blonde hair, a charming face, and a tall figure that attracted a lot of attention. Not only young boys but also older, wealthy men were drawn to her beauty. One evening before the diner closed, Paul Snyder, a charming young man, walked into Dorothy's workplace. Paul was quickly attracted to the young and attractive Dorothy. After ordering and paying, Paul handed her a large bill. When Dorothy said she couldn't give him the change, Paul laughed and offered her the money on the condition that she go on a date with him immediately. Dorothy agreed. Paul Snyder, 26, was a prominent figure in Vancouver. He managed and scouted models for clubs. He had many friends and connections across Canada. When Paul saw Dorothy, 17, with her blonde hair and charming smile, he immediately recognized her great potential. Paul asked Dorothy out on a date to a fancy restaurant and gave her a red evening gown. She later wore the dress to her high school prom. Paul and Dorothy began their relationship. Although Paul was 9 years older than she was, her parents did not object to their relationship. A few months into their relationship, Paul persuaded Dorothy to participate in a daring photo shoot. She was initially uncomfortable, but Paul convinced her that she had the potential to become a successful model and earn a considerable income. Dorothy eventually agreed to Paul's proposal. Paul found a studio and hired a professional photographer to take pictures of Dorothy. After completing the photo shoot, he sent the photos to the famous Playboy magazine. Dorothy's photos made a strong impression. A Playboy editor invited her to Los Angeles. However, Paul knew that Dorothy's parents would not approve of her working for such a provocative magazine. So he forged Dorothy's mother's signature, claiming that Dorothy's mother had given her permission to sign a contract with the magazine. In the summer of 1979, Paul and Dorothy went to Hollywood. By August, Dorothy had become Playboy's Playmate of the Month and began working as a bunny at the Playboy Club. However, she felt pressured by the attention and was not used to her new role. She also found it unsettling that wealthy men were infatuated with her and spent time with her. Paul Snider was always by Dorothy's side, always willing to help her. He was in charge of taking care of every aspect of Dorothy's life, from organizing her schedule to signing contracts. However, she also felt completely controlled by Paul. To strengthen their relationship, Paul proposed marriage, and Dorothy finally agreed after some consideration. The reason she accepted the proposal was that she felt she owed him after all that Paul had done for her. In Dorothy's eyes, if it weren't for Paul, she might still be a waitress living off tips. She always felt that if she had never met him, her life would have been boring, working at the diner. However, Dorothy's family had doubts about this decision as they thought that Paul was using Dorothy for profit. Therefore, they warned her against marrying him. In 1979, the same year that Paul proposed, they held a minimalist wedding in Las Vegas. After the simple wedding in 1979, Paul and Dorothy continued to pursue their careers diligently. Dorothy also started filming, where she received recognition from directors not only for her beauty and charm but also for her real acting ability. As Dorothy's fame and fortune grew, she used her earnings to buy a spacious home in Los Angeles, where she lived with her husband. Paul Snider was pleased with his wife's accomplishments, boasting to friends that Dorothy's growing fame was a shared success. As Dorothy's manager, Paul was always present at her photo shoots and events, overseeing their finances and assets. He also closely monitored her diet, clothing choices, and alcohol consumption at social gatherings, occasionally giving her guidance on which influential people to associate with to advance her career. There was much speculation that Dorothy had an affair with Hugh Hefner, the editor-in-chief of Playboy magazine. However, Hugh denied these claims, insisting that Dorothy was not a woman of loose morals. Over time, Dorothy began to realize that her husband Paul was controlling her life too much. Dorothy appointed a new professional manager and began to exclude her husband from photo shoots, inventing various excuses. The distance between the couple grew, and sensing this, Paul's mental state deteriorated. He became jealously protective of his wife, even hiring a private investigator to monitor her actions. However, no evidence of guilt was ever produced. Paul began to impose restrictions on his wife's clothing, not allowing her to wear provocative clothes and preventing men who did not benefit the family financially from admiring her. He incited conflicts and, in moments of anger, even resorted to physical violence. Dorothy found herself unable to tolerate her husband's aggressive outbursts and increasingly sought to distance herself from him. Friends and colleagues observed growing troubles in Paul and Dorothy's marriage. Playboy staff frequently advised her to end her relationship with her husband. While Dorothy was busy with photo shoots, Paul lived in their home, using his wife's earnings and indulging in idleness. One day, he discovered that Dorothy had set up a company in her name and was actively investing in it. The move, advised by her manager, was strategically arranged so that, in the event of a divorce, Paul Snyder would have no claim to the money. Paul's behavior escalated into more scandal as he sought his influence over his wife diminish. As Dorothy rarely returned home, Paul began to realize that his control over what he considered his golden ticket was slipping away from him. In the spring of 1980, at a gathering at the Playboy Mansion, 20-year-old Dorothy met 40-year-old film director Peter Bogdanovich, a close associate of Hugh Hefner. Peter was charmed by Dorothy and invited her to star in his upcoming comedy. Everyone laughed, and Dorothy accepted the offer to play a mistress. On March 22, Dorothy set off alone to New York to shoot the comedy. She lied to Paul, telling him that the director had forbidden anyone other than the cast and crew from being on the set. In fact, she feared that Paul might cause a disturbance during filming. Furthermore, Dorothy asked her manager to filter calls from her domineering husband while she was on set. In New York, Dorothy found herself infatuated with Peter, and a passionate affair blossomed between the actress and the director. Dorothy exuded joy at being with the new person in her life, not wanting to miss out on the opportunity with a sophisticated, wealthy, and influential director. Her attitude towards her husband became distant and cold. Dorothy spent 2 months in New York, and during this time, Paul was left alone in their large home in Los Angeles. Sometimes Paul brought other women home, who were shocked to discover that Paul was being unfaithful to such a gorgeous wife who was also a Playboy model. In April 1980, Dorothy returned to California to attend the Playboy Awards. She won the prestigious title of Model of the Year and appeared on the cover of the magazine, winning a new award. As part of the recognition, she received a lavish gift from Playboy, a Jaguar sports car, and a cash prize of $200,000. She developed a close friendship with Hugh Hefner, the editor-in-chief, who had high hopes for her. After the ceremony, Dorothy embarked on a 2-week promotional tour across Canada. During the weekend, Dorothy attended a party with director Peter. Meanwhile, she was planning to spend the final part of the tour with her family in Vancouver. However, Paul found out about these plans and immediately traveled to Vancouver, where he had experience managing clubs and numerous connections. During Dorothy's brief break, Paul coerced her into working in clubs and kept all the profits. This period led to a significant conflict between the couple. Dorothy was in tears, contemplating giving up her career to salvage the marriage. She expressed a desire to return to her parents' house with Paul and start a new life. Paul dismissed this idea. After the tour in Canada, Dorothy returned to New York to continue filming while avoiding her husband. At one point, she phoned Paul and requested some space in their relationship. Paul became depressed and angry with Dorothy. At the time, he was having an affair with a girl under the age of 18. The girl looked like a model, and Paul wanted to transform her into the next Playboy bunny. However, he soon realized that his young lover could never surpass his wife. In June 1980, on their first wedding anniversary, Paul received a heart-wrenching letter from Dorothy, in which she expressed her desire for a divorce and her intention to stop supporting him financially. This convinced Paul that his fears of Dorothy's infidelity were justified, especially as he suspected she was involved with director Peter Bogdanovich. To gather evidence of his wife's infidelity, Paul hired a private investigator. On one occasion, he called Dorothy's manager and threatened to cause trouble or even do something more serious. The manager advised Dorothy to hire bodyguards and be cautious around Paul. However, Dorothy ignored this advice. Without a green card and lacking permanent residence in the United States, Paul struggled with employment and finances. Facing the risk of running out of money, he withdrew all the funds from his and Dorothy's joint bank account. Consequently, he also sold Dorothy's valuable assets, including collectibles, jewelry, and the Jaguar sports car that Playboy had given her, all at low prices and only for cash. Furthermore, he began renting out rooms in their large house to friends, partly due to depression and loneliness. Gradually, Paul began contemplating a return to his native Canada. In mid-July, filming for the movie in which Dorothy was starring was completed. After that, Dorothy and director Peter Bogdanovich went on a 10-day vacation to England. Upon returning to Los Angeles on July 30th, Dorothy decided to move into the director's mansion in the affluent neighborhood of Bel Air. Meanwhile, Dorothy's ex-husband Paul was plotting his revenge. On the afternoon of July 31st, he borrowed a gun and went to Peter Bogdanovich's house at night. He hid near the gates of the mansion, determined to shoot anyone who came near. After hours of fruitless waiting, Paul became desperate and drove to a mountain area overlooking Los Angeles. During his time alone there, he was plagued by painful thoughts of suicide. When he returned home late at night, Paul still harbored hopes of reconciling with Dorothy. A week later, on August 8th, he convinced Dorothy to meet him at his house. However, Dorothy had changed significantly since their separation. She had become a confident woman with a newfound charm and was no longer affected by Paul's words. Dorothy told Paul that she was in love with another man and wanted a divorce. Paul remained calm and asked her to come back in a week to discuss the breakup amicably. However, the next day, Paul attempted to purchase a gun. He visited several stores but was unable to buy one because he was a Canadian citizen. Paul asks his private investigator to purchase a rifle for self-defense and home security reasons, but the private investigator advises against it and refuses to assist. On August 11th, Paul finds an ad in the newspaper for an old 12-gauge shotgun for sale. He decides to go to the San Fernando Valley to check it out and possibly purchase the shotgun. However, he gets lost and cannot find the address, so he returns without the shotgun. 2 days later, on August 13th, Paul returns to the same location and finds the seller. He purchases the old shotgun and tells the seller that he will use it for hunting. On August 14th, Paul asks his roommate to leave the house so he can talk to his wife, Dorothy, in private without interruption. Dorothy's managers and assistants advised her to accompany them to the meeting or to resolve the issues over the phone. However, Dorothy decided to go alone. She brought a large sum of money to express her gratitude to Paul for his past help. She hoped that the meeting would be peaceful and that she could maintain a friendly relationship with Paul. Dorothy planned to have a short meeting with Paul, so she scheduled a photo shoot for that evening. At noon on August 14th, Dorothy went to meet Paul at his home. Upon arrival, Dorothy received a safety check call from her manager. They had previously set up a specific code for her to use if she encountered any problems. After assuring the manager that everything was fine, the call ended. However, the conversation between Dorothy and Paul gradually became tense and escalated into a dispute. In a sudden fit of rage, Paul pulled out a gun and shot Dorothy in the face. After causing Dorothy's death, Paul seemed to lose control of himself and behaved strangely. He eventually took his own life. At 8 p.m., Dorothy's roommates returned home and found her car parked in front of the house. When they entered the house, they saw Dorothy's handbag in the living room and thought that Paul and Dorothy had made up. They assumed the couple was in the bedroom, so they decided to retreat to their own room and keep quiet. Dorothy's managers became increasingly worried when they could not reach her by phone. They finally managed to contact Paul and Dorothy's roommate at 11 p.m. After a brief conversation, the roommates decided to check out the situation in the master bedroom. When they entered, they witnessed a horrifying sight. Both Dorothy and Paul had died. According to the autopsy, Dorothy Stratton, 20, died about an hour after she arrived home. Dorothy's husband, Paul, died about an hour after his wife's death. Hugh Hefner was one of the first people to be informed of the tragic event. He called his friend Peter Bogdanovich and broke the news of Dorothy's death. When Peter heard that Dorothy had died, he was so shocked that he fainted. He then spent a long time on sedatives to overcome his pain and grief. As a result, Playboy magazine was sent out for publication before the editors knew about it, so the August cover was not changed. Consequently, the magazine was published with a picture of Dorothy Stratton, who had tragically passed away. However, for the annual Playboy issue, her image was replaced with that of another model. Peter Bogdanovich was responsible for organizing and financing Dorothy Stratton's funeral. The loss of his lover had a profound impact on him. He decided to cremate her remains, which were then buried in a Los Angeles cemetery. After the tragic death of the model, the film studio decided not to release They All Laughed, the comedy in which Dorothy had starred. Determined to promote the work, Peter bought the film rights with his own money. The comedy, They All Laughed, was finally released in 1981. Despite his efforts, the film did not receive significant praise and failed to attract much audience attention. This commercial failure cost Peter millions of dollars and eventually led to his bankruptcy. Several years after Dorothy Stratton's death, rumors surfaced that director Peter Bogdanovich had secretly met with Dorothy's younger sister, Louise Stratton, who was then 13 years old. The Stratton family strongly denied these claims and took legal action against the spread of these rumors. However, in 1988, 8 years later, Peter, then 49, actually married Louise Stratton, who was then 20. Louise later stated in interviews that their romance began when she was 18. Peter Bogdanovich and Louise Stratton were married for 13 years, ending in divorce in 2001. Peter never remarried, devoting his life to filmmaking. He died in 2022 at the age of 82. Louise Stratton, who now resides in her hometown of Vancouver, pursued a career as an actress and film director. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Wendy Trapaga. Yolanda Cirillo was born in Miami, Florida. She was a 28-year-old single mother who lived a quiet life away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Yolanda had devoted herself to raising her daughter and being a model mother, giving up the party life. After a while, Yolanda was ready to find stability and a new partner. She began a relationship with Michel Escoto, a man known for his good looks and impeccable grooming. Their relationship, which started out innocent and harmonious, gradually developed into love. Yolanda and Michel met at a computer engineering school, although they had opposite personalities. She was calm and practical, while he was a romantic, adventurous, and gregarious person. Despite their differences, they found each other and began a promising relationship. Michel and Yolanda Cirillo seemed like an unlikely couple. However, after a year of living together, they started building a family. Yolanda, who already had a child from a previous relationship, was very happy to see her boyfriend Escoto loving her daughter. Everything seemed fine, but Michel still had one unfulfilled dream. He wanted to build a successful career and start his own business. Yolanda fully supported Michel's dream because she knew that his success would ensure a stable future for her and her daughter. She also hoped that they would get married and start a family. Michel promised Yolanda that he would give them the dream life they both craved when he achieved financial success. When looking at the most lucrative industries in Miami, Michel realized that there was a great demand for cosmetic services. So he decided to delve into this field. With a basic knowledge of hairdressing, he wanted to learn more about business to open his own salon. His goal was to create a space that was welcoming to everyone. Michel found a beauty school near where he lived and enrolled in February 2002. While studying at this school, Michel found himself different because he was one of the few men in the beauty industry, while he was surrounded by young, dynamic women. These women were very interested in Michel because he was charming and easily won their hearts. This made him popular among the female students. However, despite his relationship with Yolanda, Michel could not resist the charms of Wendy Trapaga, a beautiful 21-year-old girl. He began to flirt with her and often behaved inappropriately around her, but he still did not tell Yolanda about these things. Every night, Michel still returned to Yolanda, maintaining the appearance of a normal family life, but the more time he spent with Wendy, the more he felt guilty towards Yolanda. Wendy Trapaga was different from the women Michel had met before. Wendy was sweet, charming, and had the figure of a model. Wendy was born on April 29, 1981, the daughter of Miriam and Ernest. She grew up in a normal and loving family. Wendy had always been loved by her father, Ernest, who had always made sure that Wendy had grown up in an environment filled with love and respect. Ernest had been a cargo pilot, and his job had required him to travel frequently, which had made Wendy always look forward to his return from each trip. Every time he had returned home, Wendy had been extremely happy and had received a gift from him. March 31, 1988, had been an unforgettable day in Wendy's life, when she had been 16 years old. Wendy's father's plane had exploded at an altitude of 150 feet above the ground and had crashed into a barren land near the runway. This tragedy had taken the lives of all passengers on board. The deep sadness that Wendy had experienced that day had followed her throughout her life. Ernest had been 61 years old when he had passed away, leaving Wendy's mother, Miriam, deeply saddened. After becoming a widow, Miriam had devoted herself to supporting her family and had secured a position as a school administrative assistant. She had worked hard to be able to supervise extracurricular programs at an elementary school in Miami-Dade County. Eventually, Miriam had found love again and had married Juan Bonnets. Wendy had had half-siblings who had warmly accepted her, providing her with the much-needed affection she had been missing since her father's death. During her teenage years, Wendy had developed a strong passion for aesthetics and high fashion. She had possessed a captivating beauty with deep brown eyes, long hair, and a radiant smile, attracting everyone's attention. Despite this, Wendy had remained humble and kind, making those around her admire her even more. After completing her studies, Wendy had gotten married, but unfortunately, this marriage had soon fallen apart. This had motivated her to pursue her passion and learn from her relatives who had run beauty salons. So she had enrolled in Label Beauty Academy in Miami. There, Wendy had met Michel Escato, a man who could make her smile. Michel's charm and compliments had captivated her. Michel had introduced himself as an executive in the web design industry, with a degree in technology. Perhaps the loss of her father at an early age had made Wendy more sympathetic to older men, considering them safe. However, Michel had not revealed to Wendy that he had a girlfriend, Yolanda. Instead, he had spent more time with Wendy. The feelings between Wendy and Michel had grown deeper and deeper, and they had spent more time together. While Yolanda had thought that Michel was focused on his career, the relationship between Wendy and Michel had naturally turned from emotional to physical. Wendy and Michel had gradually become inseparable. However, Yolanda had felt confused by the changes in her relationship with Michel, even though they had been together for more than 2 years. She had not known that Michel often met other women, one of whom had even sponsored his studies. Initially, Michel had only seen Wendy as a friend, but over time, he had begun to feel deeper feelings for her. He had appreciated the freedom and lack of pressure in his relationship with Wendy. However, Michel had always kept his relationship with Wendy a secret. Even though Michel and Wendy had been entering their second month of a romantic relationship, Michel had hidden it from everyone, which had made Wendy feel confused. Yolanda had also felt that Michel seemed to be growing more distant and their relationship had started to feel more like best friends than lovers. Yolanda had become suspicious of Michel's schedule, and the silence had made the two of them grow more distant. Michel had eventually decided to end his relationship with Yolanda because he had fallen in love with Wendy. In August 2002, Michelle and Yolanda had had an argument, and to express his dissatisfaction, Michelle had packed his things and left. Yolanda could not believe it. Yolanda had dreamed of a future with Michelle, but he had left without giving any explanation. Yolanda had tried to understand her shortcomings and the reason behind his departure. Yolanda had kept calling Michelle, but he had not answered. Eventually, Yolanda had deciphered his voicemail password and had discovered messages revealing that he had moved in with another woman named Wendy. Yolanda was shocked to learn of Michelle and Wendy's relationship and was furious. Michelle and Wendy had moved into a modest apartment in Miami. Unexpectedly, in that small space, the two began a life filled with dreams and satisfaction. Although some of Wendy's family objected to her decision to live with Michelle, Wendy's mother, Miriam, was concerned that Michelle was almost a decade older than Wendy and, on top of that, he was still unemployed. She wondered if Wendy and Michelle had ever shared their jobs or incomes. She was also extremely surprised to find that their house was almost bare, to the point that Wendy and Michelle had to sleep on the floor. The most important thing to her was Wendy's happiness. While Wendy was always careful about her finances and kept a tight budget, Michelle, on the other hand, was wasteful and unclear about how he earned his money. Miriam simply thought that Michelle made money through IT to explain her doubts. Because there were so many questions about Michelle, Miriam, and her daughter. Wendy disagreed about Wendy's marriage. Miriam did not agree with Wendy's hasty decision to get married. Ignoring her mother's advice, Wendy and Michelle decided to go ahead with the wedding. They planned to hold a wedding ceremony at the City Hall in October 2002, with a simple legal procedure and a not-so-complicated wedding ceremony. When Miriam asked why they got married so quickly, Wendy revealed that she was pregnant. On October 10, 2002, Wendy and Michelle exchanged vows at the Miami Beach City Hall. They then planned a simple honeymoon in Key West, Florida. Michelle and Wendy left on Friday, October 11th, planning to return Sunday evening. Their two-day adventure in Key West was filled with fun times. However, on Sunday, Michelle and Wendy were reluctant to let their short vacation end. Michelle had booked a luxurious suite in a prestigious, romantic hotel. Wendy was thrilled to have their honeymoon extended unexpectedly. Wendy informed her mother of the decision to extend their stay. Wendy's mother, Miriam, was also delighted to hear the news. Although she was concerned about Wendy's health due to her pregnancy, Miriam was happy for her daughter's happiness. Michelle and Wendy envisioned a romantic evening that included dining out, perhaps watching a movie, or dancing the night away at a nightclub. Michelle and Wendy arrived at the hotel close to midnight and spent some time alone together in their room. Little did they know that this would be Wendy's last night on Earth. At around 5:30 a.m. on Monday, Miriam was awakened by a surprise phone call. When she looked at the clock, she felt anxious about such an early call. Miriam picked up the phone feeling even more nervous. It was Michelle on the other end of the line, asking her if Wendy was with her and speaking in a cryptic tone. Michelle explained that they had gone out drinking the night before and Wendy had wanted to stay even though he had been worried about their unborn child. This had led to their first argument in the car on the way home. He had gone back to the apartment alone while leaving her outside. When he had checked back after 5 to 10 minutes, she had disappeared. All attempts to contact her by phone had failed. After her conversation with Michelle, Miriam had agreed to give Wendy some space even though she was extremely worried about where Wendy might be at the moment. She had tried not to panic, but she had known that Wendy did not act that way. At 6 a.m., a sanitation worker walking his routine route through a commercial warehouse complex in the Northwest Dade area had contacted Miami police after noticing something unusual in the parking lot between two cars. As he had gotten closer, he had come across a woman wearing a blue evening gown lying face down in a pool of blood. Forensic experts had been stunned when they had arrived at the scene and had seen blood splattered on a nearby vehicle. An autopsy later revealed that the woman had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, leaving her body disfigured beyond recognition. Although no weapon had been found at the scene, the deceased had been quickly identified as Wendy Trapaga thanks to a driver's license and a wallet containing identifying items found next to her. When Miriam had received the devastating news of her daughter's death, she had been plunged into a deep depression. Tears streaming down her face, Miriam, who had lost her husband, now had to deal with the sudden loss of her daughter. As the detectives had worked to determine the cause of Wendy's death, Miriam had received a call from Wendy's husband, Michel, asking for any updates on Wendy. Miriam had been speechless and had struggled to convey to Michel that Wendy was no longer alive. A detective had intervened, taking over the call to inform Michel that they would be visiting his home to discuss the matter in detail. Michel had been completely stunned and unable to speak. The police had taken Michel to the police station to gather more information. During a 14-hour interrogation, Michel had recounted the events of the evening leading up to Wendy's tragic death. As they had left the hotel and driven home around 3 a.m., Michel and Wendy had gotten into an argument over drinking. During the argument, Wendy had unexpectedly admitted to Michel that she was not pregnant, which had added to the tension of the argument. As they had approached their apartment, Michel had decided to go inside to give them both time to calm down, leaving Wendy in the car. That had been the last time he had seen Wendy. The autopsy report later revealed that Wendy had died from being repeatedly beaten with a blunt object, causing 15 to 20 severe injuries to her face and neck. Her face had been unrecognizable due to the injuries. There had also been signs of strangulation. Investigators had also found strange DNA on Wendy's dress. A physical examination had revealed that Wendy had had alcohol and sedatives in her system. Her estimated time of death had been between 3 and 5 a.m. on October 14th. Some strange points had also been discovered. Wendy had been found without shoes, but her feet had been clean. In addition, there had been no injuries to her hands and feet, suggesting that she might not have resisted during the attack, or that she might have been unconscious or restrained. The medical examiner had also confirmed that Wendy had not been pregnant at the time of her death, raising further questions about the reason behind her lie. Authorities had found a new lead. They had discovered that Michel had made a phone call at 3:15 a.m. the day his wife had died. Detectives followed up on a crucial lead and discovered that Michel's last call had been made to his ex-girlfriend, Yolanda. When informed of Wendy's death, Yolanda shared her love story with the police. She admitted to having had deep feelings for Michel and was heartbroken by his sudden passing. Despite attempts to contact him, he remained unresponsive until the fall of 2002, when he returned her call. When questioned, Michel admitted to having had an affair with another woman, but maintained that he had no feelings for Wendy. He said that he still loved Yolanda and hoped to reunite with her. Yolanda, who still loved Michel, trusted him again and hoped that this would rekindle their romance. However, Michel continued to live a double life. The investigation was hampered by the lack of solid evidence, including DNA, fingerprints, surveillance camera footage, or even a murder weapon. All they had were unsubstantiated statements. About 2 months after Wendy's death, Michel re-emerged as a prime suspect in the case. After being caught planning to cash in Wendy's life insurance policy, questions were raised about the true motives of Michel, who was the primary beneficiary of the policy. After this discovery, detectives suspected that Michel had a strong financial motive, seeing as the insurance policy was worth $1 million. The investigation team continued to pursue this theory. On the other hand, an unexpected aspect of Michel's personal history was revealed during the investigation. Michel had previously been arrested and charged with armed robbery. He was also charged with unlawful possession of a firearm and possession of drugs. 3 years after Wendy's death, detectives decided to interview Yolanda again, suspecting that she had more information than she had previously disclosed. After Wendy's death, Michelle and Yolanda reunited and moved in together, but their life together was not a happy one. When Yolanda was brought in for questioning, law enforcement officers presented evidence that Yolanda had been the one who had funded Michelle and Wendy's vacation after they had married. The police forced Yolanda to reveal the truth by warning her of the consequences of lying. Yolanda gradually opened up to the police. According to her testimony, when Yolanda and Michelle resumed their relationship in the fall, Michelle told her that he had to marry Wendy because Wendy was pregnant. However, in reality, Michelle was indifferent to Wendy and planned to get rid of her to get the $1 million insurance money. Michelle and Yolanda's ultimate plan was to kill Wendy and take her huge insurance money. Yolanda was blinded by her love for Michelle and decided to go along with Michelle's plan. The only thing she cared about was that Michelle would reunite with her. According to the following testimony, after failing to get rid of Wendy during the holiday, Michelle decided to take drastic action. Michelle had laced Wendy's drink with a sedative in their hotel room. When Wendy began to fall asleep, Michelle took her outside and put her in the car. In the middle of the night, Michelle went to Yolanda's house and asked her to let him use her car. Michelle then went to a parking lot far from the residential area in Northwest Dade and asked Yolanda to stay in the car for a while. Yolanda then witnessed Michelle returning to her car with blood on his hands and a crowbar. They continued to Biscayne Bay, where Michelle removed the murder weapon and washed away the evidence of the crime. Yolanda then drove Michelle back to the residence she shared with Wendy, where Michelle disposed of his bloody clothes. However, Yolanda's testimony may have been unreliable. Yolanda may have been more directly involved in the murder of Michelle's wife. If Michelle had not used the crowbar to kill his wife, it was possible that Yolanda herself was responsible for the brutality and disfigurement of Wendy's body. Unfortunately, the truth of this case may have remained unknown due to Yolanda's immunity agreement that protected her from arrest or prosecution. This was used by Michelle's attorney to place the blame entirely on Yolanda in order to protect his client. However, after deliberating for just 2.5 hours, the jury convicted Michelle Escoto of first-degree murder and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. While Wendy's family finally felt that justice had been served after years of waiting, they were not entirely satisfied that Yolanda Cirillo would continue to walk free. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Megan Newton. Megan Newton was born in 2001 to Michael and Sarah, and she also has a half-sister named Demi. Megan spends most of her time with her mother, Sarah. The two have a very close bond. They are like best friends, and Megan never hides anything from her mother. Sarah often consults her daughter on various important issues. Mother, she finds that Megan has shown wisdom beyond her years. Sarah describes her daughter as very ambitious, energetic, and easygoing. Megan's friends also describe her as humorous, compassionate, and thoughtful. Megan describes herself as having a heart of gold. Ever since she was a child, she has always been willing to help others. During her elementary school years, Megan became acquainted with a friend who had just moved from China to England. Because her English is limited and she often has difficulty learning and communicating, her teacher decides to assign Megan to help her new friend. Hoping that Megan's compassion and helpful nature will help her adapt quickly. Megan is very helpful and overcomes the language barrier to support her classmate. Megan's kindness and openness continued as she grew older, showing through her passion for sports, especially soccer. She joined the Stoke-on-Trent girls' soccer team and spent her weekends coaching girls under 7. Megan hopes to win a sports scholarship to the United States because she loves soccer and wants to pursue a career in the field. Megan even showed her love for the game by getting a small tattoo of a soccer boot. After completing her studies, Megan began her university journey with the goal of becoming a sports therapist or physiotherapist. This was a milestone as she was the first member of her family to attend a higher education institution. Megan Newton was a talented young student, ready for a bright future. Megan had been living an independent life, confident in her ability to plan and make decisions. She had moved into her own flat in a high-rise building on Fletcher Road. One night, Megan decided to go out with friends to a nightclub in Hanley. They spent the night dancing, drinking, and having fun. Early on Saturday morning, before 3 a.m., Megan took a taxi home with a friend and a young man. The next morning, a neighbor discovered a set of keys near the building with blood stains. These keys were handed to a housing officer, who noticed the blood splatter and decided to check on the occupants of the flat. When they entered the apartment with a neighbor, they witnessed a horrific scene. Megan's body was found on the bed, naked, bloody and lying face down. Megan had been stabbed multiple times with a kitchen knife, which was found near the scene of the murder. Identification documents identified the victim as Megan Newton, helping police identify the innocent young woman who was murdered in her bedroom. When the police arrived at the scene, they quickly informed Megan's family of the painful end. The family went to the morgue to identify their daughter. The police and forensics cordoned off the crime scene and collected vital information at Megan's apartment. The autopsy revealed the horrific extent of the attack she had suffered. Megan had been strangled, rendered unconscious, and then stabbed 9 times in the back, puncturing both lungs. There was also evidence of sexual assault. The fatal weapon, a kitchen knife, was found in Megan's home. The autopsy revealed that it was the stab wounds that led to Megan Newton's death. The bloody knife and apartment key were sent to the lab for forensic analysis, hoping to find the killer's DNA. It is suspected that the killer accidentally dropped the key when leaving Megan's apartment after the crime. Police began gathering information from Megan's acquaintances and relatives. Through this, they determined that Megan spent the evening at a club before calling a taxi home early in the morning. Police have been closely examining surveillance footage from the area near the nightclub and Megan's route home to track her final movements. Police are particularly interested in footage that shows Megan getting into a taxi with a friend and an unidentified young man. Another video from inside Megan's apartment complex showed the same young man as before, this time appearing on the premises. Fortunately, a camera was placed in a common hallway, giving police a clear view of the entrance to Megan's apartment, especially on the night of the crime. The police's goal is to identify the killer by carefully analyzing video footage from that night. At approximately 3:44 a.m., Megan and the young man she had shared a taxi with about an hour earlier entered the lobby of the apartment building. The two headed toward her apartment, with Megan appearing cheerful. When she reached the door, Megan used her key to unlock it and the two entered. The camera captured the moment as Megan unlocked the door. The young man standing behind her looked around the area, even looking into the camera. This behavior led the police to suspect that the young man may have intended to harm Megan. A closer look at video footage from the rest of that night revealed that the young man left the apartment the next morning at approximately 5:54 a.m. He attempted to leave the building but realized he did not have the key to the door. He returned to Megan's apartment, retrieved the key, and left. An outside surveillance camera captured him throwing an object, and a neighbor later discovered the apartment key was stained with blood. The camera also recorded him leaving the scene. He checked his hands and they appeared to be bloody. The police identified this young man as the main suspect. Police investigating the Megan Newton case investigated the surveillance footage and discovered that a man named Joseph Trevor had approached the nightclub, got into the same taxi as Megan, and then went to her apartment. Joseph Trevor is an 18-year-old boy from a family where both parents are police officers. He lives in a neighboring district and is Megan Newton's high school classmate. Joseph has good academic performance and a passion for sports, especially soccer. Joseph even won a sports scholarship to study in the United States and has played professional soccer for Newcastle. Those who know Joseph mostly consider him a kind, easygoing, and sociable person. But few people know that he has another side to his personality, which is erratic and unpredictable. Joseph can switch from being cheerful and engaging to being withdrawn, rude, and abrupt without any apparent reason. However, when the police investigated the Megan Newton case, they began to focus on Joseph's past. About 3 years ago, when Joseph was 15, he was accused by someone else of forcing a girl to have intimate contact, although the attempt was unsuccessful and Joseph was not charged or imprisoned, but many people at school knew about the incident. The police discovered that Joseph had also attended a party with friends the night before. They met at a bar, where Megan was also present. Although they knew each other from school, they only said hello and continued to enjoy their private time. However, Joseph did not stay at the bar for long. Security found him with a package of white powder suspected to be drugs, so they took him outside and called the police. When police arrived at the scene, they arrested Joseph and took him to a nearby police station. The police may have known that Joseph's parents were also police officers, so Joseph was released shortly thereafter. The police confiscated the ketamine and advised Joseph to return home and avoid using illegal drugs. Against the police's advice, Joseph did not return home. He went straight back to the club where Megan was. Joseph was then denied entry to the club. At 2:40 a.m., after Megan left the club, she ran into Joseph in the taxi queue. Joseph told Megan what had happened at the police station. Joseph expressed his concern about being scolded by his parents for drinking too much. And Joseph's parents were police officers, so they might have known about his arrest for illegal drug possession. Joseph felt anxious and did not know what to do next. Megan, out of kindness and willingness to help, lent Joseph her phone to try to contact a friend. However, Joseph could not find a place to stay for the night. When she found Joseph in a drunken and disorderly state, Megan invited Joseph to spend the night on her living room sofa. Megan and her friend took Joseph by taxi. On the way, Joseph texted his father, saying he had spent the night at a friend's house. When they arrived at the Fletcher Road apartment building, the taxi dropped Megan's friend off first. The taxi then took Megan and Joseph to the apartment building. The cameras captured them entering the building. Some time later, Joseph came out and threw the keys in the yard. Police believe that, during this time, Joseph brutally attacked Megan, leading to her tragic death. Joseph could not contest the charges because the evidence was clear. Joseph went to a bridge in Stoke-on-Trent and climbed onto the railing, sitting looking down at the pavement. It appeared that Joseph was about to jump to escape the consequences of his actions. However, Joseph had a history of depression and attempted suicide. Joseph had been found on this bridge before, when a passerby alerted the police. Joseph was taken to hospital for a psychological evaluation and was later determined to be safe to leave. He returned home under the supervision of his father. Joseph returned home and told his mother the whole truth. Joseph felt he could no longer keep the secret and realized the serious consequences of his actions. Joseph's mother immediately contacted the police to relay his confession. At that time, the police identified Joseph as the prime suspect through surveillance camera footage. They were on their way to arrest Joseph. When brought to the police station for questioning, Joseph admitted to having been to Megan's house that evening. However, he did not provide details about the attack. Joseph's account was consistent with the surveillance camera footage, which showed him entering her apartment. Joseph said that Megan voluntarily gave him the sofa. After the intercourse, Joseph suffered amnesia and had no recollection of subsequent events. Joseph maintained that the relationship between him and her was consensual and not assaultive. However, the police did not believe Joseph's story. They suspected that Joseph had deliberately erased important memories and that he was fully aware of his actions. The police believed that Joseph was fully conscious throughout. Joseph changed his story repeatedly. First, Joseph took partial responsibility for Megan's death. Then, Joseph admitted to killing Megan, but maintained that their sexual relationship was consensual. Joseph maintained this story until his trial on February 17, 2020. However, during the trial, Joseph unexpectedly pleaded guilty to all charges. Joseph was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 21 years. During the trial, Joseph turned to Megan's mother, Sarah, and said, "Sorry." This confession, by this point, no longer made sense, and it made her extremely angry. Apologies cannot fix the past or ease the pain Megan's family has endured while awaiting trial. Megan's best friend, Ricardo Eccles, shared that they had planned to go shopping in Manchester the day after Megan's death. Ricardo was devastated when he heard the news of Megan's sudden passing. The news shocked Ricardo. However, in memory of Megan, Ricardo started a fundraising campaign to help cover the funeral costs for Megan's family. Ricardo successfully raised some money, which was then given to Megan's mother. Megan has always been there for those in need, and now it's time for them to show their gratitude. Megan's family and loved ones need emotional support and help during this difficult time. Megan was a fan of Stoke City Football Club. During a match, the players and fans observed a minute's silence in her memory. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Kirsten Hatfield. Kirsten Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. Shortly after her birth, Kirsten's father left the family. As a result, Kirsten and her mother, Shannon, moved in with her grandparents, who helped Shannon take care of her. When Kirsten was 2 years old, she and Shannon moved into their own home. Later, Shannon remarried and had a second daughter named Faith. However, this marriage did not last long and ended, leaving Shannon to care for her 2 daughters alone. Despite her young age, Kirsten had to help her mother take care of her younger sister. This responsibility helped Kirsten become more independent and closer to Faith. Kirsten and Faith often slept in the same room, while their mother slept in the next room. On the evening of May 13, 1997, Shannon was getting her children ready for bed. Shannon usually read bedtime stories to her daughters, but since Faith was already asleep, she didn't want to wake her. Instead, Shannon simply said goodnight to Kirsten and went to her bedroom, leaving the girls' door slightly open. She did this every night in case the girls woke up and needed her. At around 3 a.m., Shannon awoke to a noise coming from her daughter's room. Believing her daughters were awake, she went to check on them. However, by the time she reached the bedroom door, the noise had stopped. Assuming the girls had fallen back asleep, she decided not to disturb them. But before she returned to her room, she noticed something strange. The girls' door was completely closed, even though she usually left it slightly open. She wondered if Kirsten or Faith might have closed the door, or if she had forgotten to leave it open. Shannon approached the door, opened it slightly, but did not go in, then returned to sleep. The next morning, around 6:30 a.m., Shannon went to wake her children. Upon entering the bedroom, she found only her youngest daughter, Faith, lying in bed. She woke Faith and asked about Kirsten, but Faith did not know. Shannon searched the house but could not find Kirsten. She looked outside and contacted all her friends whose children were friends with Kirsten, hoping she had gone to visit one of them. However, they all said they had not seen Kirsten. Shannon then called her father, who lived nearby, hoping Kirsten might have come to see him. But he had not seen Kirsten either. Realizing Kirsten had disappeared, Shannon called 911 and the police arrived immediately. Initially, they thought Kirsten might be hiding somewhere in the house or wandering around the town. However, as they began to investigate, it became clear that the situation was more serious. When they checked Kirsten's room, the police found the window slightly open with a few drops of blood on the window frame. Further investigation around the window led them to discover a bloody piece of children's underwear a few feet away. The police asked Shannon to identify the underwear, and she confirmed that it belonged to Kirsten. The investigators realized they might be dealing with a kidnapping and immediately called for additional police support. While searching the area around the house, the police also questioned Shannon. She recounted waking up at 3 a.m. after hearing a noise. It became apparent that an unknown criminal might have kidnapped Kirsten at that time. The police began questioning all the neighborhood residents. However, no one saw or heard anything suspicious that night. The only clue was a neighbor who had been awakened by a dog barking around 3 a.m., coinciding with the time of the kidnapping. With no clear leads, investigators called in a child psychologist to speak with Faith. Despite being only 3 years old, she told them she had witnessed her sister's kidnapping. However, she only said one short sentence: "A bad guy came and took my sister away." This confirmed that Kirsten had not left the house voluntarily, but it still did not provide any specific information about the perpetrator or Kirsten's whereabouts. Detectives were forced to restart the investigation from scratch. They suspected that the kidnapper might be someone Kirsten knew, as there was no sign of a stranger being able to enter Kirsten's room without making a sound. While investigating this hypothesis, the police discovered that Kirsten's mother had a history of drug problems. From there, they began to consider the possibility that the kidnapping was related to this. There were two main theories. First, Kirsten's mother may have owed money to someone in the criminal world, and they decided to capture Kirsten to collect the debt. Second, the police did not rule out the possibility that the mother voluntarily handed Kirsten over to the kidnapper. If the second hypothesis were true, it would explain why the kidnapping was carried out quietly. The police questioned Shannon, but she denied any involvement in the case. She claimed that she had long been drug-free and would never do anything dangerous to her daughter. Although the detectives did not rule out her involvement, they did not find any concrete evidence. Therefore, they decided to seek the public's help through the media, asking people to share any information related to the case. After the media announcement, the police department received hundreds of calls. The detectives followed up on each lead, but most did not yield any useful information. However, they did discover some disturbing clues. A woman called the police, suspecting her boyfriend of being involved in Kirsten Hatfield's kidnapping. He had been acting aggressively and had threatened the woman. When police investigated the man, they discovered some alarming information. He was known to Shannon's brother, which meant that Kirsten may have known him. Furthermore, the house that Kirsten and her mother shared previously belonged to Shannon's brother, leading investigators to believe that the suspect may have been familiar with the layout of the house. The man also had a history of drug and assault charges, which led police to suspect that he may have been involved in the case. The man claimed he had been at a bar the night of the incident. After verifying the information, police found multiple witnesses who confirmed he was at the bar until approximately 4 a.m. This ruled out the possibility that he had kidnapped Kirsten. Investigators then pursued hundreds of other leads, but none led to any results. The case dragged on for months, and the hope of finding Kirsten alive diminished as time went on. Kirsten's mother, Shannon, could not simply sit around and do nothing. From the very beginning, she made every effort to find her daughter. She gave interviews to local media, distributed flyers about Kirsten, and even investigated suspects herself. However, Shannon faced many challenges in her quest to find the truth. For example, She contacted local businesses to ask them to distribute flyers about Kirsten in their offices, stores, and facilities. Many businesses refused, saying it was not in line with company policy. Shannon tried to arrange a meeting with the state governor but was unsuccessful. She also set up a small center to attract volunteers to help with Kirsten's case. The center focused on distributing flyers and communicating with the media. However, Shannon encountered some difficult problems, including volunteers stealing money and using the media to gain attention. Nevertheless, she persisted and did not give up in her search for the truth. After years of trying, Shannon realized that her current approach was not working. So she decided to change direction. She enrolled in college, earned a degree in criminology, and became a probation officer. Her goal was not only to find her daughter's kidnapper but also to protect the community from criminals who could pose a threat. She believed that Kirsten's kidnapper may have had other criminal records and wanted to prevent them from committing further crimes. While investigating her daughter's disappearance, Shannon delved into the history of violence in the town and surrounding areas to find any connection to the abduction. However, all her efforts yielded no positive results. Shannon was faced with the fact that Kirsten might not be alive anymore and that she might never be able to bring her back. Despite this, she never gave up on finding answers. The police reopened the case several times to look into new leads, but to no avail. They worked with the FBI to create a physical sketch of Kirsten years after the abduction. However, no one thought Kirsten was still alive, but without any remains, they could not confirm this with certainty. The case seemed to have stalled for years until a major breakthrough in 2014. A woman contacted the police with a strange story. While sorting through her grandmother's inheritance, the woman found a diary. The diary revealed that the woman's son had confessed to killing Kirsten Hatfield. The story contained enough detail that detectives were convinced it was true. According to the diary, the man kidnapped Kirsten from her bedroom and took her to a house he owned in a nearby town. There, he brutally abused Kirsten and murdered her. The process was recorded in many pages of the diary, which sent shivers down the spines of even experienced investigators. The diary also revealed that the entire incident was videotaped. When the police questioned the woman's son, they expected him to deny any involvement in the crime. However, his words surprised them. He claimed to have no involvement in the crime but knew who the killer was because Kirsten had been murdered in his ex-girlfriend's house. This left the police baffled, and they had to ask him for the address of the house. Detectives quickly obtained a warrant and sent a team to thoroughly inspect the house. They began by spraying luminol, a substance that glows when it comes into contact with the smallest traces of blood, even if the blood has been wiped from the crime scene. When the forensic experts did this, they were shocked. One of them later said that the entire house lit up like a Christmas tree. The experts discovered traces of blood everywhere in the house, and especially that the blood stains matched the description of the murder in the diary. To gather more evidence, they removed the floorboards, cut up the wallpaper, and sent it all to the lab. They also excavated the property to search for the victim's remains. The police also found a box containing hundreds of videotapes in the house, which reminded them of the diary. They suspected that one of the tapes might contain footage of the victim's abuse. Detectives examined each tape carefully but found no evidence of the murder. Excavations on the property were also fruitless. No remains or other evidence were found. However, the police still believed they had discovered the truth behind Kirsten's disappearance. The case was solved, but the pain and suffering of Kirsten's family will never be completely healed. Detectives faced an unexpected turn when analyzing the blood stains left in Kirsten's home. The results showed that the blood was not human but that of an animal. This shocked the police because they thought they were close to solving the case. Instead, they were faced with another false clue. It is unclear exactly what the clue was, but it is possible that someone played a prank on the police or that the diary was written by a mentally ill person who saw the kidnapping on the news and believed that a story would spring to mind. However, the detectives continued to hope to uncover the truth. But no new clues emerged and the case went cold again. In the summer of 2015, the case was handed over to Detective Daryl Miller. He decided to start a new investigation and studied all the existing documents and records. During this process, he discovered something strange. Daryl found that his predecessors had overlooked key evidence: blood stains on the windowsill in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. This evidence had been in storage for a long time for unknown reasons. The police apparently did not think that analyzing it would yield any useful results, as they believed the blood might belong to the victim. However, Daryl decided to send the evidence to the lab for analysis. And it yielded a big surprise. The lab results showed that neither of the blood samples belonged to Kirsten, but instead to an unknown man. This was a major breakthrough in the case, but also posed a new challenge for Daryl. The kidnapper's DNA sample had been uploaded to the FBI database, but there were no matches. This could mean that the kidnapper had not committed any serious crimes in the past, or that the crime had occurred before the database was created. Daryl decided to collect DNA samples from all the men involved in the case since the kidnapping. The police made a list, located each person, and sent their DNA to the lab. Surprisingly, each individual was willing to provide a DNA sample immediately. This led investigators to suspect that the killer might not be on the list of suspects. Daryl waited patiently for the results, and eventually, he received a call from the lab. Experts analyzed a sample and found that it was an exact match to the blood on the windowsill and on the victim's underwear. This person was Anthony Palma, a 56-year-old neighbor of the Hatfield family. Anthony was one of the first people the police spoke to after the kidnapping. At the time, he said he had been awakened at 3 a.m. by the sound of a dog barking. Now, after confirming his involvement, detectives decided to question him again. Although the DNA evidence was sufficient to convict him, investigators still wanted him to confess. This would expedite the trial and help them find Kirsten's remains. Since he was the only one who knew where the remains were, locating them would be difficult without his cooperation. The detectives took a cautious approach. They brought Anthony in for questioning, saying it was merely a formality to gather new information. In fact, they wanted him to admit whether he had ever been to the Hatfields' house. When asked if he remembered anything else from that night, Anthony told the same story he had told 18 years earlier, but this time he added a new detail. He said he had seen a white car parked in front of Kirsten's house. But he didn't pay much attention to it. Next, the police wanted to know more about his relationship with Kirsten and her family. Anthony explained that although he lived next door, he had never spoken to Kirsten directly. He stated he was close to other kids in the neighborhood and that they would occasionally come by for candy or help repairing their bikes. The police then continued to question Anthony, asking if he had ever been to Kirsten's house, whether to help the family or just to chat. But Anthony insisted that he had never been to her house. This statement raised suspicion among the police. While investigating the crime scene, they had discovered his blood on the windowsill of Kirsten's room. By checking his previous statements, the police realized that Anthony had lied. However, there was one important problem: the house where Kirsten had lived belonged to Anthony's friend, and he admitted to having visited the house in the past. However, the blood on the windowsill was very fresh and could not have been there many years before the murder. The detective decided to present the critical information and informed him that his blood had been found in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Anthony completely denied this and repeated that he had never been in their home. The investigators tried to get him to confess, but he continued to deny it. The detective decided to change the method of questioning and left the room. Detective Daryl was asked to step in and talk to Anthony. Bringing a photo of Kirsten, the detective placed it on the table in front of the suspect. Anthony immediately pushed the photo away and tried to avoid looking at it for the rest of the conversation. Daryl asked Anthony a variety of questions, hoping that he would make a mistake and confess to the crime. However, Anthony continued to deny everything. Realizing that they would not be able to extract a confession, the police decided to end the interrogation and arrest him. They then obtained a search warrant for the house and excavated the surrounding area but found no trace of Kirsten's remains or any other evidence. During the trial, Anthony consistently denied his involvement. However, DNA analysis revealed the truth in court. Additional details emerged, showing that the police had overlooked some important information during the initial investigation. Anthony had a criminal record, including breaking into another girl's bedroom and assaulting her. He had also been incarcerated in the 1980s for an assault involving a weapon. This information further highlighted Anthony's dangerous criminal status. However, for some reason, his previous convictions were overturned in 1997. In late 2017, a jury found him guilty of kidnapping and murdering Kirsten, sentencing him to life in prison. Throughout the trial, he never revealed the location of Kirsten's remains, and the police doubted they would ever find her. The biggest problem in finding Kirsten's body was related to where Anthony was known to operate. As a park ranger, he was familiar with remote areas and might have chosen a hard-to-reach place to bury the body. Nevertheless, Kirsten's mother, Shannon, persisted in her search for her daughter. Shannon kept in touch with Anthony while he was in prison, hoping to find clues about Kirsten's whereabouts. During each meeting, Shannon felt Anthony was slowly revealing information, but he ultimately remained silent. In 2019, Anthony was killed by a fellow inmate over a personal grudge related to his crimes against a child, leaving Kirsten's family almost without hope of finding her body. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Doreen Erbert. Doreen Erbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California, into a family of 5 children. From a young age, she was a kind and positive person, always looking for ways to help others. After graduating from college, Doreen moved to San Francisco and began working as a physical therapist. At the age of 24, she met Michael Venice, a man who worked in a factory near Doreen's clinic. After getting to know each other for a while, Doreen and Michael started dating, and a few months later, they decided to get married. In 1976, they had a son named Paul. Initially, Michael and Doreen's life was very happy, but after having a child, their relationship began to have problems. After about a year, Doreen and Michael decided to divorce. Their son was raised by Doreen, while Michael was still allowed to visit him regularly. Despite the divorce, Michael and Doreen maintained a cordial relationship. A year later, Doreen met a man named Charles. They began dating, got married, and decided to move to San Jose, settling in a quiet residential area. In 1979, their daughter Deanna was born. Charles, like his wife, dreamed of having a large family. He was overjoyed when their daughter was born. However, tragedy struck the family in February 1980. 4-year-old Paul climbed over the fence around the pool and fell into the water. Doreen, who was home at the time, realized what had happened too late. She pulled her son out of the water and called an ambulance. Paul was taken to the hospital and put on life support. However, after 10 days, doctors concluded that there was no chance of survival. The decision was made to disconnect the boy from the machines. Doreen became depressed and devastated, blaming herself constantly, even though the police concluded that it was not her fault. However, Doreen's young daughter Deanna helped her through this pain. For years after the tragic event, Doreen's family finally had some good news. Doreen and Charles had been trying for another child, although they had failed twice due to interrupted pregnancies. But Doreen finally became pregnant again, and this time, everything went well. They were expecting a new baby boy, due in early November. A few days before Doreen was to be admitted to the hospital, her family decided to join in the Halloween festivities. On the evening of October 31st, all the neighbors decorated their houses and handed out candy to the children. Deanna, who was 4 years old at the time, was very keen to join in, and her parents couldn't say no. Although Doreen was 9 months pregnant, she went trick-or-treating with her daughter while Charles stayed home, handing out candy to other children. The mother and daughter returned home just before 9 p.m. Charles informed his wife that they were running out of candy and that he planned to drive to the nearest store to buy more. He left the house around 8:50 p.m. and returned about 15 minutes later. As he approached the house, Charles noticed that the front door was slightly ajar, which he found strange. When he entered, he found his wife lying on the hallway floor, surrounded by a large amount of blood. Doreen showed no signs of life, and Charles immediately called 911. Shortly thereafter, he noticed the body of their unborn child in the living room. Charles was in a state of shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. Initially, he thought that Doreen might have had a miscarriage, but he quickly realized that the situation was much worse. Beside the child was a human hand, and Charles immediately understood that it was Doreen's hand. When Charles realized that his family was being attacked, he began searching for Deanna, fearing she might be in danger. He saw so much blood on the floor that he slipped and fell while running through the house. Luckily, Deanna was still alive, but she was hiding behind the sofa in the living room out of fear. When the ambulance arrived, paramedics found Doreen and discovered that she had a weak pulse. They rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, doctors were unable to save her, and she died in the ambulance. Tragically, Doreen's unborn child also died from the brutal attack. Medical experts examined Doreen's body and concluded that she had been repeatedly hit with a long, sharp object like a sword or machete. The police investigated the house and found a horrifying scene that looked like something out of a horror movie. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, and even on the ceiling. Several police officers sought psychological help after witnessing the horrific scene. Investigators searched the entire house but found no perpetrator or any clues about the attacker. While investigating the murder, police found significant evidence outside the house. They saw bloody footprints on the sidewalk and suspected that the killer had left the scene in a vehicle. While searching for more clues, police found a blood-stained wolf mask on the front lawn. They believed the mask might have belonged to the killer, as family members said they had never owned it. The mask was sent to a lab for analysis. Police then spoke to Deanna, the only surviving child from the murder. She was in shock but still able to talk. She told police that after her father left for the store, someone knocked on their door. Her mother, Doreen, opened the door and saw a man wearing a wolf mask holding a knife. The attacker said, "I'm going to kill you now." Doreen screamed, telling her daughter to run away from the house immediately. Deanna hid behind the sofa but could not remember what happened next. It was not until her father found her that Deanna calmed down. Unfortunately, Deanna was unable to provide any further information about the attacker, as he had hidden his identity behind the wolf mask. Investigators initially suspected Doreen's husband, Charles, as the prime suspect. Since he had been out of the house around the time Doreen was attacked, they were suspicious of his trip to the store. When Charles returned, he had stepped in blood several times and even fallen, ending up covered in blood, but the police did not know whether he had done this on purpose to explain the blood stains on his clothes. However, detectives found several problems with this theory. First, Charles's shoes did not match the ones that left bloody footprints on the road. Second, there were no traces of blood found in Charles's car, nor were there any other shoe prints. To clarify the information, the police went to the store that Charles visited and confirmed the time he was there. The employee confirmed that Charles had bought candy at the store that evening. This indicated that he did not have enough time to commit the murder. Surveillance footage also confirmed that Charles was at the store. Therefore, the police no longer considered him the prime suspect. First, they asked Charles if he could think of anyone who might want to harm his family, and Charles immediately mentioned Doreen's ex-husband, Michael. Charles said that initially, Michael maintained a normal relationship with his ex-wife. However, things changed after the death of their son. Michael believed that Doreen had intentionally killed the child to cut off all contact with him. Michael even filed a civil lawsuit against her, but he lost the case. Doreen thought that there was a reason behind the change in Michael's behavior. He had a history of depression after the birth of his son and was distant from both his wife and child. All of this made Michael introverted and caused communication problems. These problems became one of the main reasons why Michael and Doreen decided to divorce. Later, when Doreen married Charles, Michael began to harbor resentment and hostility towards her. This became even more apparent when Michael began to truly hate his ex-wife. Later, Michael lost his job at the place where he had spent most of his life. This created many negative issues in his life. After hearing all this information, the detectives decided to go to Michael's house and talk to him. Although Charles's testimony was not enough to make Michael the prime suspect, since he lived only 2 miles from Doreen's house, they decided to visit him immediately. Around midnight, the police arrived at Michael's house and saw a pickup truck parked near the garage. When they shined a flashlight inside the car, they saw what appeared to be blood on the steering wheel and keys. They then knocked on Michael's door, but no one answered. The lights were on inside the house, and the police could hear water running inside, which made them suspect that Michael might be destroying evidence or washing bloody clothes. So they continued knocking. Michael finally opened the door. He remained calm even after being informed of his ex-wife's murder. Michael answered all the police's questions calmly and allowed them into his home without a warrant. According to him, he had gone to the store during the day, returned home, and had not left since. Michael even signed a form giving the police permission to search his home. As he reached for a pen to sign, the investigators noticed a deep cut on his right hand. Michael explained that he had accidentally cut himself earlier while carving pumpkins for Halloween. However, the police were skeptical. The wound was still fresh, and blood was still oozing from it. As several police officers began searching Michael's home, he was asked to go upstairs with an officer to show his identification. However, when he entered the bedroom, Michael's actions aroused suspicion as he appeared to be reaching under the bed. The officer asked him to move away and found a loaded gun holster under the headboard. After discovering the weapon, the police took Michael downstairs to meet with other officers. Their colleagues discovered other suspicious evidence. They found drops of blood on the floor, which led them to the garage, where there was a washing machine and bloody clothing. Based on this evidence, the police had enough to arrest Michael. Detectives and forensic experts investigated Michael's home, looking for more evidence that could connect him to the murder. Police are awaiting the results of blood analysis and have discovered other grisly signs. Initially, the police discovered an empty box containing an 18-inch machete. Medical experts determined that the shape of the knife matched the wound on Doreen's body perfectly. In addition, the police found 2 makeshift coffins in Michael's home, raising suspicions that they might be for Doreen and Charles. They also found mortuary bags, the type typically used by paramedics, in Michael's home. The presence of these items made the police question Michael's innocence. After compiling all this evidence, the police decided to apply for a warrant for Michael's arrest. Without a warrant, they could only detain him for a limited time. However, the judge said that the evidence they had gathered was not strong enough and that there were many unknowns. As a result, Michael was released and he was freed. 3 days into the investigation, detectives received lab results. The results showed that there were 2 different blood types at the crime scene. The majority of the blood matched Doreen's blood type, while a small amount matched Michael's. This indicated that Michael had injured himself during the attack on his ex-wife. The judge quickly issued an arrest warrant, and Michael was charged with the murder of his ex-wife and her unborn child. Detectives continued their investigation and found additional evidence linking Michael to the crime. When they spoke to acquaintances of Michael, they learned that he owned the wolf mask found near Doreen's house. They also found a photo of Michael wearing the mask at a previous Halloween party. To further solidify the case, police found the mask Michael wore in the photo in his home. Michael's trial began in July 1988, 4 years after Doreen's murder. He initially admitted to the crime but later changed his story. He did not deny the murder but claimed he was innocent by reason of mental illness. A psychologist assigned to monitor him concluded that he did have serious mental illness. According to Michael, he became insane on Halloween night when he saw other children trick-or-treating. This reminded him of Paul's death and caused him to collapse. He said that he went to Doreen's house that night with a machete. When she opened the door, he said, "You killed my son," and that he intended to kill her. She immediately recognized the man behind the mask, shouted at her daughter to run, and the next second, Michael attacked her. However, Michael's story had one twist. He said he did not know Doreen was pregnant. This raised suspicions as all her friends claimed that she was clearly pregnant before the tragedy. They even joked that Doreen had become even bigger because of her pregnancy. The murder of Doreen and her unborn child came to light at a trial. The prosecution argued that Michael was fully aware of his actions and had planned to kill his ex-wife and her husband. He had told his friends about this desire, and detectives found evidence that he had made elaborate preparations, including 2 coffins and body bags, in his home. However, it appears that he changed his mind and did not carry out his murder plan. This led the prosecution to suspect that he may have feared being caught or discovered. One of the key witnesses in the case was Doreen's daughter, Deanna. She was only 9 years old at the time and still remembers what happened. After a year of investigation and trial, Michael was convicted of murder. He was sentenced to death, but before his execution, the state of California imposed a moratorium on executions. Therefore, Michael remains in custody and his sentence may not be carried out anytime soon. The case left a deep mark on Deanna's life. Years later, she was still haunted by the horrific memories of her mother's death. However, she decided to forgive Michael and try to forget the past.